वॉल्यूम ठीक है, वॉल्यूम Hello. Hello everyone. Welcome to Sunya IAS. Today I'm starting the discussion with respect to the solved paper of Geography Optional Paper 1. So let me quickly help you recall. Okay. After paper was conducted, we have taken an in-depth analysis already with respect to both paper 1 and paper 2. Okay. In that discussion, okay, that video is available, you can go through the link. In that video, we have done the analysis, in-depth analysis, कि questions कहाँ से आए, कौन से theme से आए, कौन से unit से आए, कितने weightage के आए. Today's perspective is very simple, that is, we will try to understand what is the demand of those questions and we will try to solve those questions, okay. So I'll be helping you integrate thinkers, okay, some important example cases etc. across the papers so that you understand, okay, how to attempt that paper, Geography Optional Paper 1, and subsequently we'll be doing that also for Geography Optional Paper 2, okay. Now this analysis, that is with respect to the weightage of the marks, that is very important because we need to understand what are the trends, okay. So क्या trends रहे हमारे इस साल, क्या रहे 23 में, and what are the anticipated trends in next year, okay, that can also be calculated with the help of analysis that we have done already, okay. And we'll be doing this in the program that is starting from 15th of the September, okay. We are starting with a batch of GO 300 plus. That is the objective of the 300 plus batch, that is to discuss the questions and answers in a manner so that you can anticipate the themes, okay, which might come in the next year mains examination. Now with respect to the analysis, okay, this analysis has already been done. ये weightage का marks का distribution paper 1 and 2 we have already done, okay, in the previous discussion, that is in-depth analysis of the geography optional papers. तो आप वो वाला लिंक देख लें वीडियो का और उसमें आप एनालिसिस समझ जाएंगे कि क्या आया इस साल, क्या ट्रेंड्स है एक्सेट्रा. Just a quick recap, let me tell you that in paper 1 we have observed, okay, again now thoughts has become important this year. तो पिछले कुछ सालों से only hardly 1 or 2 questions were asked from thoughts. This year directly many questions have come from thought, okay. Physical geography questions, they were straightforward, right, and from paper 2 there were many interlinkages. So this is a quick recap. Now let's start the discussion with respect to geography optional paper 1 today, and subsequently we will also take up the geography optional paper 2 in-depth analysis and in-depth solution for the answers, okay, for geography optional paper 2, right. Let's start the discussion for geography optional paper 1 today. So we will discuss one by one each question. I will provide you with some discussion which you can give in the answer of these questions, ठीक है. तो आप लोग अगर क्लास देख रहे हैं तो थोड़ा सा जॉटिंग्स करते रहें, थोड़ा नोट्स बना लें ताकि ये डिस्कशन आपको याद रहेगा बाद में कि इन क्वेश्चंस में आपको क्या लिखना है, कैसे आपको इसमें थिंकर्स इंटीग्रेट करने हैं, हाउ यू नीड टू इंटरलिंक दी कंसेप्ट्स, ओके. सो लेट्स स्टार्ट दी डिस्कशन फ्रॉम क्वेश्चन 1 ऑफ ज्योग्राफी ऑप्शनल पेपर 1, ओके. सो वी आर स्टार्टिंग विद सेक्शन A. Okay. So first question, A part, okay. Explain the causes of GLOF, glacial lake outburst floods. We will be using the term GLOF. Now dear students, there might be some students who are very new to geography. तो आप लोग डरना नहीं, पैनिक नहीं करना. कुछ टर्म्स हो सकता है आपको अभी समझ में नहीं आ रहा, ओके. But once you will be done with the foundation course in the FC batches, आपको समझ में आ जाएगा कि ये terms का क्या मतलब है, what is the interpretation of these terms, what is this theory for, etc. Okay, for now you must know how to solve the paper. Okay, so first question is with respect to GLOF, glacial lake outburst floods. Explain the causes of GLOF. Okay, now in this question, to solve this question, first of all you should know what is GLOF. Okay, what are the reasons, causes of GLOF? Okay. Why there has been an increasing frequency of GLOF recently? Okay, and what can be the consequences and solutions? Now this will be a very lengthy answer. ये तो 15 या 20 marks के लिए suitable होता. This is a 10 marker question. So what we need to do is, we will focus more on the causes, and with the help of a diagram you can show the causes properly. With respect to consequences, हम causes में ही थोड़ा सा उसको integrate कर देंगे, but yes, in the conclusion you must provide some long term sustainable solution, या फिर कुछ interlinkage बना के आप इसको end कर सकते हैं. Okay, now see, in the introduction what can be the format here? In introduction you can either define the concept, okay, which would be fine, because they have specifically asked you the causes, so you must tell what are GLOF. So GLOF is a release of melt water from a moraine or ice damped glacial lake due to dam failure. Okay, so whenever nowadays what is happening is glaciers are retreating, so the volume in the glaciated lakes, high altitude glacial lakes, okay, the volume of water that is increasing, it is expanding. As this glaciated lake, it expands in volume. Okay, so what would happen? This water that was contained by a natural dam like a structure, okay, with the help of unconsolidated sediments. Okay, so unconsolidated sediments which were kind of holding this glaciated lake. Now because of expansion of that glacial lake, because of increase in the volume, simply इसको समझो कि इसका volume बढ़ रहा है, ठीक है, जैसे कि एक कंटेनर में पानी है. Now if there will be overflow of water in that container, then what would happen? That water would come out of that container. So that is what is happening here. पानी यहाँ से बाहर आ जाएगा. Okay, now because it is breach of the unconsolidated sediments, okay, that is moraine, so what happens? This happens very rapidly, एकदम suddenly होगा बच्चों, ठीक है. So this is a rapid outburst. So this is what is a GLOF. Okay, now because of overflow there can be consequences. भैया okay. Okay, now GLOFs have certain features. What are the features? They involve sudden and sometimes cyclic release of water. Okay, so this is a sudden release of water because there is an outburst. Now very importantly, it can be complicated because on that particular time there can be an outburst also. Okay, that is, for example, there can be a cloudburst associated with GLOF also, कि cloudburst हो गया वहाँ पर, and that also associated with heavy rainfall, and then a GLOF. Okay, because now high altitude, these conditions that are happening, that is, there are also incidences, increasing incidences, okay, that is of cloudburst. So complicate हो जाता है ये पूरा scenario, but this can be very sudden, very rapid, like we have seen in case of Kedarnath tragedy, and nowadays it is also being associated with Uttarkashi. Okay, Uttarkashi में भी जो flood हुआ है, there are certain studies which are pointing out that there was a glacial lake, okay, which had been breached. तो अभी उसके ऊपर study चल रहा है. Okay, now these are rapid events, but they can last for 3 to 4 days also because there is a lot of water. Okay, and hence mapping is also very important for the glaciated lakes. Then they result in large downstream river discharge. Okay, because of the order of magnitude that is very high. So this can implicate the villages which are located in the downstream. Okay. Next, very importantly, in the recent years and especially in the recent decades, we have seen an increasing trend of the GLOFs. Okay, so in different areas, the human activities that have expanded recently. So we are moving away, that is, from low altitude regions even into high altitude areas, and much of the development has been unsustainable. Okay, so here because of that expansion, what is happening, that is, these areas which were hitherto untouched by humanity, now they are being impacted, and this is happening across the different regions of world. Okay, so that is why in the introduction, although you could have given definition, but again you could have used another terminology. Okay, that is because of excessive possibilism of man. Excessive possibilism of man, okay, maybe plateau. Man acting as an active agent of change. Okay, so GLOF, they are also natural phenomena, but because of anthropogenic activities which are increasing in these high altitude glaciated areas. So this is more associated with excessive possibilism. So here we can quote plateau maybe. Okay, so that is how you can integrate thinkers in the answers. Okay, so here you can see that this is a glaciated lake, okay, but because of expansion there can be breach and hence rapid outflow. Okay. Now very importantly, we know about the causes, how it has increased in frequency in the recent years. We know about certain examples. So hence it is very important for us to do a satellite imagery. GS1 में भी इस type का question है इस साल. Okay, that is with respect to GIS etc. inclusion, okay, in geographical studies. So here, towards the conclusion, after mentioning the causes and related consequences, so consequences can be varied. It can be economic, okay, it can be associated with an impact downstream on the agriculture. For example, agriculture standing crops, okay, now they are devastated across multiple states across Himalayas. Himalayan region में इस साल standing crop, okay, that has suffered a lot. Okay, be it apple cultivation, be it the cultivation with respect to vegetables in high altitude areas, etc. Okay, so consequences can be multifaceted. It can also impact those regions, okay, which are high altitude range head areas, but which are now being frequented by a lot of glaciated lake outburst floods and etc. Rainfall in those areas can cause havoc because these are range shadow areas. They are ecologically very fragile. Okay, so in those areas it can impact the settlements as well. Please remember throughout the discussion today and the discussion that we are going to do for geography optional paper 2, okay, later on in the next video, please try to integrate the concepts across physical and human geography, across different units of geography, both across physical into physical and human interlinkages into human, and across physical and human, and across paper 1 and paper 2. Then only your answers will be holistic. So here we are not only talking about GLOF, it will be having causes and consequences both related to physical and human aspects. Okay? Just keep that in mind. So remote sensing and satellite technology, so use of spatial analysis in studying the GLOFs, okay, and hence trying to understand the impacts, causes and consequences. Okay. So here we can use the satellite imageries. Okay. So we can take the satellite imageries. So what was the volume, let's say, in 1900s, how much it has expanded in 1950s, and currently what is the volume expansion. Okay. So probably by 2050, okay, so from 2020 to 2050, what can be the expansion? So by having these satellite imageries, okay, we can understand that what are the chances that this particular glaciated lake might witness GLOF. This is very important. Please understand why. Because this issue has been so much in news in the past 1.5 years. Secondly, when the GLOFs were encountered for the Sikkim region, there were many articles which were published, and they had highlighted that the zoning for GLOFs was already done for this region surrounding Sikkim and the glaciated areas, and it was already highlighted that these lakes might witness GLOF. So if it is happening, it is not something which is not anticipated, क्योंकि mapping तो हुआ है, बहुत सारे glaciated lakes का mapping अभी हो रहा है, because there are new glaciated lakes formation also which is happening subsequently. Okay. Next, it also helps in tracking variations in the lake sizes, water levels, okay, by providing us the valuable data for risk assessment. Okay. So what can happen, for example, this is a map which I have shown, which shows certain areas in Uttarakhand which are at high risk, okay, with respect to GLOFs. ठीक है, अगर आप इसको देखोगे तो कुछ areas जो हैं, okay, they are demarcated because we know about the existing GLOFs, okay, because of the existing glaciated lakes, और वहाँ पर GLOF हो सकते हैं. But there are certain areas which are unnamed because these are the areas of new glaciated lakes formation. Okay. So for example, Pithoragarh, Maban, okay, Lasar Yangti Valley, okay, Pyungru, Pithoragarh, Dharma, then Chamoli, Doli, Ganga, okay, very important because Chamoli region has already witnessed some of the glaciated lakes out with flood also. Okay. Then very importantly, it is not alone in India that this phenomena is to be studied, because it is important, because Himalayan region and the downstream areas that would be impacted severely, but across different parts of the world. Okay, so this was an article which was published in ResearchGate. Now you can use use this for validating data. That is, what is the source? Now see, there are different generals. We frequently use these different generals in our discussion in geography optional answers because it provides authenticity कि हम जो data दे रहे हैं ये हमने कहाँ से लिया है. वर्ल्ड बैंक का डेटा है, यूएन रिपोर्ट हमने पढ़ी है, आईपीसीसी 6 रिपोर्ट पढ़ी है, ठीक है, या फिर कोई जनरल को हमने रेफर किया है. सो अक्रॉस द डिफरेंट केस स्टडीज आई विल बी यूजिंग द डिफरेंट सोर्सेस. सो रिसर्च गेट इज अ वेरी गुड रिसोर्स. सो ये एक पेपर है रिसर्च गेट में दैट इज विद रिस्पेक्ट टू मैपिंग ऑफ द GLOFs. ये कुछ टाइम पहले पब्लिश हुआ था विच आई हैड रेड, और ये एक अच्छा स्कीमेटिक है दैट इज आई एम शेयरिंग विद यू. Okay, so there are different areas where the GLOF mapping has been done. Okay, so for example, you will see that globally Okay, so globally there have been almost 3000 outbursts, okay, small, medium and large scale types, okay, since the 1980s. Then in Asia there has been larger frequency of outburst, around 600, okay, and also you can see that is happening across Alps and the other regions as well. You need not remember all of that, just remember that the glaciated lake outburst floods have become a new phenomena. Okay, so towards conclusion, what you can write? Towards conclusion, because see, you need to give the holistic coverage to an answer, okay, so that examiner feels that you have understood the concept well. Okay, in beginning, because we were talking about, okay, possibilism, we had quoted Plato. So towards conclusion, you can probably end with, okay, because it has been a breach of the upper limits, okay, of the nature. So what do we require is again an organic unity. Okay, so organic unity. Now see, these are the terms which can be used repeatedly across different answers. Today I will show you by limited knowledge how you can make your answers. Okay, look geographical in nature. आपको 2-3 concepts अच्छे से पता है and they can be used across papers. So now we have used the terminology organic unity, Humboldt or Ritter, right? But the concept that they named it is Zusam and Hang. So you can use the terminology Zusam and Hang across some other answer. So here you can quote maybe organic unity, Humboldt. So in a single answer you have given certain data, case study. This is a 10 marker question. Okay, I have elaborately discussed this with you because I wanted you to understand how you can deal with even 10 marker question in a very elaborate manner. 10 marker question है, but उसको कैसे हमें holistically attempt करना है. In the other 10 marker, we will be keeping our discussions a bit shorter. Okay, 10 marker है, 2 ही पेज लिखने हैं बच्चों, तो उसके लिए आपके पास sufficient content होगा, I think. Okay. Next question. What is solifluction? What are its impacts? So the question is asking you, what is this? Okay, so simply you have to define this. Okay, what is it associated with it? Okay, and what are its impacts? Simple question, okay, which you can trace from geomorphology, okay, that is processes, and also nowadays because the freeze and thaw mechanism that has become common because of the global warming. So these regions were in news because of multiple reasons. So first of all, it was in news because of increasing temperatures across these areas, okay, but there are certain phenomena, okay, like the increasing temperature of the glaciated, periglaciated regions, increasing frequency of heat waves, okay. Atmospheric rivers, this phenomena is also witnessed, okay, which has resulted into freezing and thawing, increasing the temperatures here, and which is also leading to an increase in the frequency of these processes, okay, like the solifluction. Okay, so this is the context which you can include in the introduction, but because they have asked you definition, you must define it. So solifluction, also referred to as gelifluction, okay, in the periglaciated environments, is the slow flow of saturated soil. Okay, so this is not a very fast movement, this is slow flow, which might be also ignored by the common person because it is a very slow movement. So slow flow or saturated soil, okay, down slope, indicating no frozen ground is present in the moving layer, okay. So this is a very slow movement. Now movement of this saturated soil can be initiated by thawing. So because of freeze and thaw, this solifluction might be initiated, okay, and it might be impacted by the other factors. Or factors क्या हो सकते हैं, okay, like the relief of the slope. So if the relief of the slope, that is steep gradient, is there, so it might be a bit faster. But even if the gradient is less, we can witness solifluction, okay. Depth of the thaw and water content. So if the water content that is higher, so we might witness solifluction, okay. Now because permafrost is impermeable to water soil overlying, it may become oversaturated and slide down slope under the pull of gravity. So hence here very importantly it becomes a mass movement. Now soil has been opened and weakened by the process of frost action, is most susceptible here, okay. So this is solifluction, so movement of soil slowly, okay. And very importantly it can, okay, the solifluction, it reaches its maximum potential in the late spring and summer months when the thaw saturate, okay, soils. Saturated soils have increased pore pressure, resulting in unstable conditions because of lack of friction and cohesion now. So it might start flowing, okay, under the influence of gravity. Simple. Okay. It can happen on slopes with a gradient less than 1 degree, but it is more common on slopes with gradient 5 to 20 degrees. Okay. With more relief, soil saturation typically decreases as the water drains down the slope as runoff. Okay. So stratified and multi-layered slope sediments, for example in the Colorado Front Range, they can be attributed to the solifluction. Okay. Now in this particular answer, as a value addition you can add what I have already told to you, that is this phenomena can be witnessed in these regions because of increasing freeze and thaw, and eventually this would also impact the periglaciated areas. Okay. For example, how? So here you can add on that these regions, okay, that might be impacted, okay, because of increasing frequency of these mechanisms, they might be impacted in a manner, that is the vegetation, okay, agriculture might be, that agriculture becomes in short term prosperous, but long term it will be impacting the landscape of this entire region. So landscape will be altered in a long term duration, but in a short time it might impact the landscape in a manner that agriculture might become prosperous because of warming weather, but it might also lead to conflicts, man-animal conflicts. Okay. It will be also impacting the migration of the species. Okay. And might also lead to increase in settlements in this region, permanent settlements. This is already what we are seeing. Okay. So certain dwellers here who were living in temporary settlements here, okay, like transhumans kind of settlements, now they are settling in permanent wooden houses also. So all of these processes are interrelated because of the large scale global climatic changes, but also because of the regional impacts. Okay, for example, which is impacting the freeze and thaw mechanism. Okay, so in this manner you can attempt this particular question. Okay, next is a question which can be traced from, okay, geomorphology, that is what geological and tectonic processes lead to the formation of the napes in the orogenic belts. Okay. So geomorphology, plate tectonics theory, folds and faults. Okay. Now in such a question you can start with the context. Okay. So you have already traced from where it is asked. So in introduction you can start with the context of plate tectonics theory. So different type of plate interactions, okay, which can be explained with the help of PTT, plate tectonics theory. So different type of plate interactions, they result into formation of different landforms. This can be the introductory line, okay. So different type of plate interactions in which the continent plate conversions can result into both folding and faulting, okay. This can be your introductory line. So continental plate conversions can lead to folding and faulting. Very simple, okay. Now when we are talking about folding, okay, so very simply when we are talking about the folding, okay, because of the compressional forces there will be folding, okay. This is CC conversion, so there will be compressional and folding, okay. Now for a 10 marker question, I think just keeping your content, okay, strictly adhering to NAPIs, that would not provide justice. Now because you have identified the theme कि अच्छा ठीक है ये प्लेट टेक्टोनिक्स थ्योरी, कंप्रेशन, सीसी कन्वर्जन्स, तो अब आप इसको थोड़ा इलैबोरेट कर सकते हैं. आपने ध्यान दिया होगा अगर तो आगे एक और क्वेश्चन है, हिमालयाज आर राइजिंग. Now if you are also attempting that lengthy question also has the scope of inclusion of CC collision, okay. So here probably you need to draw a different diagram for CC conversions. वहाँ पर थोड़ा elaborate दिखा दो, यहाँ आप different type of folds दिखा दो, okay. So that would help in giving both type of diagrams कि एक तो compression होगा, so what can be the resultant fold? So one can be symmetric, other can be asymmetric, okay. Then it can also lead to overturned folds. तो इस तरीके से आप जो है इसको थोड़ा explain कर सकते हो. So my suggestion will be in this answer, after the introduction, okay, you can mention that this conversion leads to folding, okay, and there are different types of folds in which one type can be NAPIs, okay, NAPIs folding in the orogenic belt, okay. So then you can draw this diagram of different types of folds. क्योंकि 10 मार्कर है, कुछ तो अलग करना है ना बच्चों, ठीक है. So symmetrical, asymmetrical, isoclinal, overturned, okay, recumbent and chevron folds. तो आप different type of folds बना सकते हो, okay. Probably you can in a box give a definition also, that is a fold is an undulating structure that forms when rocks or a part of the earth crust is folded, okay, under compressional stress. So thrust and fold NAPIs are found in the internal and the external portions of the orogenic belts. They might be exposed, okay. Now NAPI, okay, can be a thrust fault of the earth's crust that is caused by the contraction, or it may be a large recumbent fold also, okay, that is an undulation in the stratified rocks of the earth's crust having an essentially horizontal axial plane, okay. So you can see this, that is now the axial plane, that is horizontal, okay. So horizontal axial plane, okay. So in this manner, this is a small schematic diagram which is showing the different folds here, okay, but you can also show them separately, okay. With the help of these diagrams you will be able to provide the substantial content to this answer, okay. So that is how you can write this answer from the given knowledge of plate tectonics and the different type of folds and what are NAPIs, okay. And yes, you can mention about the structures being found across different parts of Himalayas, okay. तो उस तरीके से आप इसको attempt कर सकते हैं, okay. रीस्टार्ट कर लो, ये जा नहीं रहा. Okay. Okay. So now you must know that in a 10 marker question, okay, तो कैसे हम with the given knowledge उसको attempt कर सकते हैं. Just one second, there I think there is some technical error, so we are resolving that. So main idea should be with the given knowledge how you are going to attempt that particular answer. Okay, that should be the perspective. ठीक है. Okay, let's move to the next question. Now next question is question D. Okay, explain the relationship between air masses and local winds. Okay, and climatology. So here we can directly overlap it with the question of the air masses and the impact on the localized climatic conditions, okay, associated with the local winds. So this is the particular question. Let's try to understand what you could have written in this particular answer. Okay, now see in this question. Okay, first of all, in the introduction, probably you can start with the definition of air masses. Simple 10 marker question है, air masses को आप define कर सकते हो. So what is an air mass? So air mass is a widespread body of air, okay, with similar temperature and moisture characteristics. So temperature and the moisture characteristics, they are similar, okay, in both the horizontal and vertical. That is homogeneity with respect to temperature and moisture condition. Simple. So air masses may cover several thousand square miles, but the temperature conditions, they are homogeneous. Now in this question, probably you can draw the air masses, okay, of a particular region where you want to show the localized impacts. Now see, when we are talking about air masses, immediately हमें strike होना चाहिए, air masses, they get modified. Okay, so once they get modified, okay, under what conditions? So one can be, okay, mechanical barrier. So because of a mechanical barrier, it might get uplifted. Okay, so for example, the maritime air mass here, it might get uplifted. Okay, and it gets modified, we know that. Okay, so on the windward side, it provides us with rainfall, and towards the leeward side, because of the adiabatic compression, okay, so here it is warming, so dry winds. Okay, so this is also one of the impact you can associate it with the local winds here, right? So one can be the mechanical barrier, but it can also undergo changes, modifications, because of the underlying changes in the temperature of the surface over which it is traveling. Okay, so temperature changes because of the underlying surface. Simple. Okay, so it get modifies. Now the air mass that is modified. Okay, now this air mass, wherever it is traveling, it would induce the changes or not? Yes, it can lead to localized changes. For example, here as we have discussed. Okay, so this one interaction is relationship between air mass and the localized wind. that is the dry descending air mass that results into formation of the local dry conditions, local dry winds, warm winds. Okay. Now, very importantly, these air masses interaction that also is associated with the fronts. So, you can also discuss about that. And you can also discuss with respect to the high pressure and low pressure conditions which can influence the local weather conditions. Okay. So, ascending and descending. So, here you can see ascent. Okay. Low pressure conditions and then rainfall, and here descent and high pressure conditions. Okay. So, warm winds. So, these are also the impacts and the interaction between the air masses and the localized winds, temperature, pressure condition. Okay. So, in this manner you could have attempted this particular question by taking some specific examples from Northern Europe and parts of North America, because here the air masses are prominently developed. Okay. So, here I have shown certain air masses also across Northern Europe. Okay. So, for example, polar maritime air mass, okay, that is around Arctic Sea region, Greenland, which brings cold showery weather. Okay. Arctic maritime air mass, okay, then tropical maritime, etc. You can discuss some of them, that would be sufficient. Okay. So, this we have already discussed. So, high pressure or the low pressure conditions which would impact the localized conditions. Okay. And how they would impact the local winds and the local atmospheric and the pressure conditions. Okay. Now, next question, that is, what are the fundamental differences between the ocean waves, ocean currents and the tides? Now, see, this is only a 10 marker question. So, you should know how much content you need to give here, because you cannot expand the content here too much. For example, आपने ocean currents पे ज़्यादा ही content लिख दिया, तो बाकी दोनों के लिए content compromise हो जाएगा. Okay. Now, the primary difference lies in the conditions of the generation of ocean waves, ocean currents and the ocean tides. Okay. So, oceanic circulation are of different types, and they are on the account of how they are generated. So, the mechanism behind it. Okay. So, you could have mentioned oceanic circulations. Associated with determinism. Now, here you can also use, okay, probably the concepts, okay, that is maybe from perspective you can associate some of the concepts here. You can link thoughts, perspectives, okay, that oceanic circulation, age of voyages, and later on by 1950s and 60s, okay, by various oceanic explorations. We have come to know much about the oceanic circulations, okay, by the exploration of the ocean bottom topography, etc. So, many new concepts have also been proposed like that. You can just start the introduction in such a manner. Okay. So, you have included some concepts of the thought as well. Okay. Now, primarily in the body, okay, you will struggle to give a common diagram. Now, my suggestion could be, you can give this particular diagram as well, okay, thermohaline circulation, but you can also show a small schematic map showing some of the oceanic currents probably. Okay, you don't have much scope for that. Now, you must give the mechanism differentiation, okay, that is start, okay, from the different types of the oceanic circulation and how they are generated. So, for example, as the energy is transferred from wind through the water, it leads to the formation of the waves, okay, because of the action of the wind. So, the generation of waves. So, this is the mechanism behind the waves. Next, gravitational pull, that is associated with, very importantly, okay, the formation of the tides. And next, the large stream of water flowing through the oceans is current. Now currents are because of the differentiation in the temperature, in the salinity, in the density. Okay, so temperature, density and salinity differences leads to the formation of, very importantly, the third type of movement, that is oceanic currents. Okay, now waves and oceanic currents are horizontal, whereas the oceanic water, okay, tides, they are the vertical movement. Okay, so in this format you can mention the differentiation. Okay, apart from that, you might include some of the schematic diagrams, and my suggestion will be to give this answer a comprehensive feeling. So another point of discussion here could have been, as we have mentioned it here, okay, that is age of voyages, etc., determinism, but now how they are being impacted because of the human activities. Because of the rising sea surface temperatures, okay, rise in the sea surface temperatures. So it is going to impact the thermohaline circulations. Okay, you can add on this point, but apart from that you can also include another discussion, that is what are the impacts of such oceanic circulations. Okay, impacts of oceanic circulations. So this could be another point of differentiation. ठीक है, तो बच्चों बात हो रही है oceanic waves, oceanic currents, tides. So how do they impact a particular region? So tides, mostly they are impacting the localized particular region. Okay, so that impacts that particular region on a daily basis, and that also can be associated with some aspects of the tourism. Okay, so coastal area tourism, that is influenced by the tides also. तो tides को देखने के लिए लोग जाते हैं, etc. So in that context, tides become important for a particular region. Okay, oceanic waves and currents, they have a larger impact, and especially oceanic currents, so that can also be associated with the transportation of the nutrients. Okay, heat mechanism transfer and all of that. So that is also another point of differentiation. I hope you understand this now. Okay, so you can add that transportation of the heat. Okay, heat transported similar to the general circulation of the atmosphere. Okay, and cold waters of the Arctic and Antarctic Circle move towards warmer water in the tropics. Okay, like that it helps in the heat exchange, and then it is also associated with the fisheries, warming of the temperatures in the coastal areas, and probably if you could have thought in that time, that I can also associate it with the interaction of the ocean currents with the air masses, and how do they influence the temperatures and the localized weather conditions of particular region. Okay, for example, okay, western coast of Europe. So you could have added this point, that is interaction of the oceanic currents with the air masses that influences the localized weather and temperature conditions. So it also influences certain economic activities like fisheries. It impacts the population distribution. Okay, temperatures are a bit moderate. Okay, so the livability aspect, that is impacted, and it also impacts the settlements and economic activities. Like that you could have comprehensively written a good answer. Now the points of differentiation are not alone in the context of mechanism, but we have differentiated it in the context of the other aspects. What are the impacts? Okay, what are the consequences of these different types of oceanic circulations? Okay, their generation, differentiation, कि वो generate जब होते हैं तब कैसा differentiation है, and etc. Now you have sufficient content for a 10 marker question. I hope this is clear to you. Okay. Now next question. Let's move to the next question. Now read the next question. Okay. Now next question Okay, that is question 2a. How does denudation chronology help in understanding the sequential development of landscapes and the landform? Elucidate. Okay, this is a direct question from geomorphology. Okay, now see, here I want to point out very important aspect. In geomorphology this year, what we have seen, in the past years also, some questions, one or two questions that frequently come, they are a bit trickier ones, but these terms, these concepts, they are from PYQs. ये पहले पूछे हुए क्वेश्चन है बच्चों, तो इनके ऊपर आपका एक शॉर्ट नोट रेडी होना चाहिए. वैसे आई एम एंटिसिपेटिंग ये फाउंडेशन की क्लास से आपको क्लैरिटी होगी. और डेनुडेशन क्रोनोलॉजी, ओके, इरोजनल सरफेसेस एक्सेट्रा, ये कंसेप्ट्स आपको पता होना चाहिए. दिस इज अ PYQ थीम, so this is not something which could not have been anticipated. Now see, the term itself, denudation and chronology. Okay, now even let's assume that you do not know this term. You know the term what is denudation, ये तो पता होगा. Chronology क्या है ये भी पता होगा. Okay, now when you combine them both, you would get the answer. You would have been able to write something or else. Okay, but in this 20 marker question, because ये 20 marker है, अगर sufficient content नहीं है, then you must not attempt these type of questions. Okay, otherwise you will get trapped. Now denudation and chronology. So denudation plus, okay, so denudation, okay, plus chronology. So chronology, that is how it has happened over a period of time. So how the processes have been operating, which have shaped the landscape. Okay, and the resultant landforms that we see, okay, they are on the account of the processes which have been operating in the past. So that is why in the introduction itself you can start with this line, that is, present is the key to past. You can use uniformitarianism. Okay, Hutton. Okay, so you can start with these concepts. Now let me tell you briefly what you could have written in the content. Okay, now denudation, as you know, it involves the processes. Okay, the processes which have been operating over a period of time. That is why chronology. Okay, so processes that causes the wearing away of Earth's surface by moving water. Okay, so processes which are operating over a period of time, so chronology, okay, which have led to wearing away of Earth's surface because of the action of agents which can be variable. Okay, now just going, okay, a further point away, now these agents which are operating, they can be variable depending also upon the climatic conditions. So that can be fluvial action, that can be ice, glacial action, aeolian actions, okay, waves, etc. This leads to reduction in the elevation. Okay, and finally the base level is reached. So reduction in the elevation and in relief of the landforms and landscape, so that when studied over chronology over a time period, that is what is denudation chronology. So denudation, that is weathering plus erosion, the processes which are operating. Okay, and denudation chronology means reconstruction of the denudational history of a given region. So what were the processes which were operating on that particular region? Okay, we are trying to reconstruct that. So reconstruction of the denudational history of a given region to understand the formation of the landscape. Okay, so the Earth's surface has a history that leaves traces in the present day landscape. So we need to study those traces to understand the chronological sequential development of the landform. Okay, simple. So these traces which have been left, okay, so these traces which have been left by different agents which have been operating on the landscape, okay, makes possible the partial reconstruction of long term landscape change. Why the term partial here? Okay, हम इसको partial क्यों बोल रहे हैं? Because we do not have all the traces. Very important term here. Do we have all the traces? We do not have all traces. Okay, now see, what we are trying to say is, on this landscape there are certain traces, okay, and by studying them we can reconstruct the past. But the question here is, do we have all the traces? No, we do not have all the traces because in the geological past we have lost some traces. Now how did we lose some of the traces? We have lost some traces because of the changes in the climatic conditions. So there have been ages, okay, where there has been a snow cover for elongated time period. So we have lost certain traces. So we cannot create the historical past through those traces because those traces have been lost. And actually much of the traces have been lost. Okay, that has been confirmed by the scientists, that has been confirmed by the researchers, that most of the traces that we have lost, okay, because there have been ice ages, because there have been sea level changes, okay, and some of the traces that might not have been preserved so as to give us an idea about the chronological history. So hence study of the surfaces can be done, but that might not give us, okay, the actual interpretation. That is also one challenge here. You could have written in the answer as well. Okay, so hence this is only a partial reconstruction. This is primarily based on historical or chronological approach of landform study, which involves the basic concepts. Okay, there is sequential change in landform through time. Okay, very importantly, sequential change through time. The idea of uniformitarianism, cyclic nature of earth history. That is why we are saying present is the key to past. There has been a sequential development of landforms. Okay, palimpsest topography, which has preserved the traces of the past. Okay, then division model of the cyclic evolution of the landforms. Okay, and reconstruct the geomorphic history of the region concerned on the basis of present and remnant relict landforms following the dictum present is the key to past. Okay, so this was the demand of the question. Now in Savindra Singh Geomorphology, chapter 17, page 308, and good discussion has been given in 2-3 pages. बहुत अच्छा discussion है जो आप थोड़ा सा refer कर सकते हो if you don't have the idea about this concept, denudation chronology, and certain examples from India about the concept. Okay, you can go through these pages, but you would have got sufficient content to write if you had some idea about these concepts. Okay, let's move forward. Now what is deep sea mining? What are the potential benefits and risks associated with it? Now say this is a question from oceanography, oceanic resources. Now let me tell you briefly, first of all, okay, when we talk about these concepts from oceanography, so let me tell you very briefly an important point of analysis. That is, from oceanography, in the past few years, we have seen contemporary issues and topics in news becoming important, okay, which have come repeatedly. So here also deep sea resources mining has been much in news. So that is why this theme has been asked. Now you can overlap this theme with multiple themes. Okay, so one can be, first of all, can be resources, definitely. So resources diversification. Okay, but very importantly, you can also associate it with geopolitical aspects. Okay, you can associate it with energy security, etc. Okay, so deep sea resources which have been historically not explored, now been explored, would also lead to development of new transportation routes development. Okay, so exploration of the unexplored. Of unexplored areas, that is terra incognita. Okay, so all these dimensions should have been interlinked in this question. This was just not alone a simple question of deep sea mining, because deep sea mining, although oceanography, which is fine, but it has got to do lot of linkages with economic geography, okay, with political aspects, okay, political theories etc. You can apply it here, inland, heartland and all of that aspects, ठीक है, वो भी आप apply कर सकते हो, transportation, communication. Now the unexplored areas that would be explored, so this is terra incognita now, okay. So these discussions need to be added in the answer to make the answer more comprehensive. Otherwise you would be writing just a simple answer on deep sea mining, what are the potential benefits and risk associated. Now see, okay, deep sea mining, that is associated with the processes of excavating mineral deposited, okay, from the ocean floor, which contains valuable metals, maybe copper, cobalt, we are talking about polymetallic nodules, okay, etc. So which is very important, because we are talking about energy diversification, resources diversification. We need not be dependent only upon few resources, few regions. So for that matter of fact, for energy security, for economic development to higher stages of Rostov, we would require the exploration of these oceanic resources, which is fine. Okay, so while interest is growing due to declining terrestrial resources, we have reached the upper limits of growth of the terrestrial resources, but we still want to go to high stages of Rostov. Okay, so it faces significant technological challenges and poses severe risk to deep sea biodiversity and ecosystems. Okay, so here the context that needs to be developed here is because they have asked you benefits and risk. So on one hand, we are talking about resources diversification, because we have reached the upper limits of growth. So new Malthusianism. Okay, so resources diversification to moving to higher stages of Rostov. So पूछा है उन्होंने benefits and risk. Okay, so these are the benefits, that is resources diversification to moving to higher stages of Rostov. Okay, we are talking about, okay, higher order of social capillarity, reducing the import dependence, industrialization, but on the other hand we are also talking about the approach that we need to pursue. Okay, so now the resources that needs to be exploited should not be exploited like we have exploited the terrestrial resources, very importantly. Okay, otherwise again we will be breaching the upper limits of growth, simple. So here the approach should be nature as nurture. Okay, we need the resources, but the order of precedence should be nature is priority. Nature is in higher order of precedence when we talk about nature and man. Okay, nature has not been created to exploit by man, okay, unsustainably. It can provide us with resources but not infinitely, so there are limits to growth by taking into consideration that approach. Okay, nature as nurture. We must exploit the resources but not infinitely. Okay, nature as nurture, because there are risks which are associated. So risk can be regional and global. So you can write about that, regional risk and global risk. Regional risk will be associated with those regions, okay, where the deep sea mining that will be having an additional impact. For example, the island territories, coastal areas, etc. Okay, and it is going to have the global repercussions if associated with the technologies which are going to hamper the localized ecosystem, marine ecosystems. So it will be having a longer repercussions. Okay, so hence the technology which is used, it should not be impacting the marine ecosystems, the coastal ecosystems. Very importantly, the emissions which are, okay, being produced of the deep sea mining, okay, there are ecological repercussions because of the ecological equilibrium. For example, we have seen recent cases of oil spilling, etc. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration, because still the technology for harnessing the potential of deep sea mining, that is under development. So we should not extensively utilize the technologies to hamper the deep sea resources and the ecosystems there, okay, because that would be having a very large repercussion, because we also have the biological, energy, mineral resources, etc. which are interlinked in that manner. Okay, इस तरीके से आपको इसको आंसर करना है. Okay, and you can draw a small diagram, okay, which includes polymetallic nodules, hydrothermal vents, etc. Okay, इस तरीके से आप इस आंसर को अटेम्प्ट कर सकते हैं. Okay, and an add-on, so we had taken up a discussion in Geographica, that is an article, India advances in deep sea mining technology. Okay, but there is also contradiction, that is oceans on brink, because one side we are talking about protecting 30% ocean by 2030, 30 by 30, वो initiative है, right? But very importantly, okay, only 2.8% is effectively protected. So this is a contradiction, this is a dichotomy that we have created. Okay, so you can show certain protected areas and which can be severely impacted. For example, the Great Barrier Reef, which has already been impacted because of the, okay, unsustainable development which is taking place. Okay, and apart from that, even in the Indian Ocean region and some of the other marine protected areas, 1 or 2 areas you can show, and you can mention that unsustainable deep sea mining can cause an impact on these ecosystems. तो इस तरीके से आपका आंसर भी जो है well balanced हो जाएगा. Okay, in this manner you can attempt this particular question. Okay, next question is a simple question. इसमें हम आपको वैल्यू एडिशंस बता देते हैं, आप क्या ऐड कर सकते हो. मैन एंड वाइल्ड लाइफ कन्फ्लिक्ट्स आर एवर इंक्रीजिंग, डिस्कस इट्स कॉजेज, consequences and remedies. Okay, this is a simple question. So man animal conflict because of deforestation, livestock grazing, okay, which also leads to deforestation, population explosion, etc. So all of this context you know. Okay, what are the value addition that you can write? Now see why this is happening is simply because the areas which were designated, okay, to be habitated by animals, that is being encroached, simple as that. Okay. So encroachment has resulted into man-animal conflict, simple, because we are expanding. Now this expansion can be on account of, okay, sprawling, conversion of natural landscape, to cultural landscape. Man is leaving the imprints. Man is leaving the imprints, that is genre de vie, on nature. So because of which this encroachment is happening. We are turning the natural landscapes into cultural landscapes, simple as that. So here probably you can use the concept of Vidal, okay, man's imprints on nature, okay, because of which this encroachment is happening, because we are expanding our territorial space towards the areas, okay, which were habitated by the animals, different species. So these were biodiversity rich regions now which have been encroached, okay, and now you can go on with the reasons and all of that. This is just a value addition. You can use another specific case study, okay. So this case study we had discussed in the classes, case study, okay, that is Mediterranean Sea region. So the biodiversity hotspot region in the Mediterranean region, okay, Valencia, Murcia, etc., there has been lot of sprawling and encroachment of biodiversity hotspot region. So this is one classical example of how it can result into man-animal conflict. Take another example, okay, of snow leopard across the high altitude HKH region, okay. So these are few examples that you can take. So these conditions have resulted into man-animal conflicts, okay. So you can discuss the other factors as well. So encroachment by settlements, conversion of the land, habitat loss, okay, agricultural area conversion into agricultural areas, invasive species, climate change, forest fires, positive feedback loops, etc. okay. But because this question is from biogeography, तो आपको ध्यान रखना है, थोड़े वो वाले concepts भी आने चाहिए. Our approach has been shallow ecology and not deep ecology, okay. Our approach has been nature as a suffract. So because of which this has happened, so there has been certain implications, consequences, okay, consequences on the food web, food chains, okay, loss of the habitat, biodiversity loss, etc. You can include different examples from different biodiversity hotspots and how there has been encroachment. ठीक है, Amazon और Congo पे तो question भी है, okay. तो इस तरीके से आप इसको डिस्कस कर सकते हैं. What are the solutions? Solutions can be short term and the long term solutions, okay. Designating those areas as wildlife corridors, transboundary reserves, okay. Our approach should be of deep ecology. तो उस तरीके से आप करके इस आंसर को अटेम्प्ट कर सकते हैं. बट दिस इज एन ईजी आंसर, इसको आप अच्छे से लिख सकते थे. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. नाउ एग्जामिन द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ एटमॉस्फेरिक tricellular circulation system. Describe with examples its importance in making the earth a living planet. Now see, after the paper was conducted, many students have shown their answer scripts to me. Now one mistake I have seen in this answer is that, बच्चों ये समझो ये 20 marker question है. You cannot write 3 pages on atmospheric tricellular circulation system. उतना डिफिकल्ट तो नहीं है ये कंसेप्ट कि 3 पेज लगेंगे इसको समझाने में. बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंटली ये पार्ट आप लोगों ने मिस किया है. डिस्क्राइब विद एग्जांपल्स इट्स इंपॉर्टेंस इन मेकिंग अर्थ अ लिविंग प्लैनेट. ठीक है. ट्राइसेल्युलर सर्कुलेशन. Now that is simple. Probably you can devote 1.5 page, maybe 2 pages, but you need to write with specific examples. उसकी वजह से कैसे अर्थ एक लिविंग प्लैनेट है. Okay. Is tricellular circulation important or not? Yes. So how it results into population distribution, density distribution, and it is associated with variations in the economic activities, etc. That was the primary demand of question. ठीक है. अब ट्राइसेल्यूलर मॉडल बोला है तो उसको सिंपली समझा दो विद द हेल्प ऑफ ओके द सर्कुलेशंस एंड द डिफरेंट सेल्स. ओके, पोलर, हेडली एक्सेट्रा. सेल बता दो और सर्कुलेशन बता दो. ये डायग्राम पक्का आना चाहिए. इसको ये मत समझो दिस इज अ वेरी सिंपल डायग्राम, ये क्यों बनाए हम. दिस इज मस्ट बिकॉज दे हैव आस्क्ड यू ट्राइसेल्यूलर सर्कुलेशन. ओके, अब ये क्वेश्चन देख के ये भी समझ में आ गया होगा कि ये चीज़ें पूछी जाती हैं, इसको इग्नोर नहीं करना है. ओके, देन you can show the wind systems. Okay, trade winds, westerly, polar, easterly, etc. ये आप उसके साथ में दिखा दो, क्योंकि इसी से हम ये भी बता सकते हैं. So for example इसको हमने mention कर दिया equatorial low, let's say A, B, like that. So zonally also you can describe the impacts as well. Okay, simple सी बात है. अच्छा, अब आप इसमें बता दोगे थोड़ा सा प्राइमरी प्लानिटरी विंड्स. ओके, ट्रेड विंड्स, वेस्टर्ली, पोलर, ईस्टर्ली एक्सेट्रा सर्कुलेशन. ओके, एंड एसोसिएटेड विद इंसुलेशन, राइजिंग विंड, ओके, टेम्परेचर, प्रेशर एंड प्रेसिपिटेशन हियर, एंड देन दी सबसिडेंस, सबट्रॉपिकल हाई, divergent air, then rising at subpolar low, and then okay again subsidence at the polar regions. Now because we have demarcated it as A, B, C, etc., so you can show the impacts, how it impacts the earth as a living planet. Okay, but my suggestion will be interlink them with secondary okay local wind conditions as well, because hey, the trades are also associated with monsoons or not? Yes. Okay, they can be associated with localized changes in the conditions of temperature and pressure, okay, along the mountain areas, along the coastal areas. So my suggestion will be, please include that discussion. Take a case study of monsoons, how it impacts monsoon. So ये भी तो ये वाला part हो गया ना, earth as a living planet. Okay, so South Asian monsoons impact of the tricellular circulation along with the localized conditions. Now you can go a step ahead. हम सिर्फ tricellular की बात क्यों करें? My suggestion will be include upper tropospheric winds as well, and then combinedly you can mention. इस पे एक short छोटा सा एक paragraph लिख लो और साथ में बता दो कि along with the tricellular and the upper tropospheric wind conditions, how the localized conditions are impacted, which impacts the habitability of a particular region. Okay, so the structure would be, इसको आपको कैसे लिखना होगा, ठीक है, तो मेरिडियोनियल एंड जोनल. Upper tropospheric winds, so how they combinedly impact the temperature, pressure of a region. Here you can take different examples. Monsoons, ये केस स्टडीज बता रही हूँ मैं आपको, ठीक है. एयर मासेस, नॉर्थ अमेरिका, in linkage with tricellular and the upper tropospheric wind circulation, how they are modified and etc. Okay, वो यहाँ पे आपको बताना है, ठीक है. सिर्फ ये नहीं बताना है ट्राइसेल्यूलर एंड अपर ट्रोपोस्फेरिक विंड्स, ये दोनों कंबाइन करके बता दो. ट्राइसेल्यूलर में तो बहुत सारे पॉइंट हो गए ना. सो ट्राइसेल्यूलर, ओके, फॉर एग्जांपल राइजिंग एयर एट इक्वेटोरियल लो, Okay, heavy precipitation, equatorial rainforest. Plantation, agriculture. इसके ऊपर भी क्वेश्चन है इस साल, राइट? Then subsidence at subtropical, high pressure belt, dry deserts, and like that. इस पे तो बहुत सारे पॉइंट्स हैं आपके पास में. इधर आप इसको थोड़ा सा लिंक कर दोगे विद एक्यूमीन एंड नॉन एक्यूमीन. Aristotle. So Greeks were talking about those areas which are habitable, non-habitable. You can just interlink briefly. आप लिख सकते हो एक्यूमीन, नॉन एक्यूमीन, एरिस्टोटल, ग्रीक्स, ऐसे करके. ठीक है. So how that is impacting the localized conditions, इसके तो बहुत सारे points हैं बच्चों. Tricellular, what I am trying to say is everybody will write about tricellular and the impact. Go a bit beyond it, because this is a 20 marker question. Include the discussions around subtropical jet stream, polar jet stream, interaction with the tricellular model, air masses, etc. ये सारा आप लिंक कर सकते हो आंसर में, और इससे आपके मार्क्स और अच्छे आ जाएंगे. अब इम्पैक्ट किस किस पे हो सकते हैं? लोकलाइज टेम्परेचर, प्रेशर, एग्रीकल्चर, इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, फिशरीज, एक्सेट्रा. बिकॉज क्या ट्राइसेल्युलर मॉडल, ओके, अलॉन्ग विद द इंटरेक्शन विद द ओशनिक करंट्स, would that also impact the fisheries or not? Yes. For example, okay, the fisheries around the eastern coast of North America and coast of Japan. So is there an influence of the tricellular model and the oceanic currents or not? Yes. तो वो आपके कुछ पॉइंट्स थे जो एड ऑन हो सकते थे. ठीक है. सो डिटर्मिनिज्म इज ऑलवेज देयर. डिटर्मिनिज्म इन्फ्लुएंसिंग द इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज ऑफ मैन. तो यही तो क्वेश्चन बना है, ये डिटर्मिनिस्टिक है कि नहीं इंटरप्रिटेशन. For example, agroecological regions. So this is determinism. जब सेकेंड पार्ट आपको स्टार्ट करना था उसके पहले आप आराम से लिख सकते हो. Okay, line of sample. Man is the product of Earth's surface. सिंपल. ये सूटेबल है कि नहीं? यहाँ पे एकदम एप्ट आप जो है थिंकर्स इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं. जस्ट थोड़ा सा ब्रेनस्टॉर्मिंग करना होगा, क्योंकि बताना तो यही है ना कि ट्राइसेल्युलर जो हमारा मॉडल है इससे क्या इम्पैक्ट हो रहा है हमारे हैबिटेशंस पे. ठीक है, एग्रीकल्चर पे. तो दिस इज डिटर्मिनिज्म. अब आप डिटर्मिनिज्म को कैसे भी आप लगा सकते हो. एग्रीकल्चर इज दी वन इम्पॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट, इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन एक्सेट्रा. So in this format you could have attempted this question. This was a very nice question. And in section A for me this was a very good question. Okay, that is question ये वाला जो था ट्राइसेल्युलर वाला, इसके सारे पार्ट्स अटेम्प्टेबल थे अच्छे से, तो ये आप कर सकते थे ये वाला क्वेश्चन. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन, व्हाट इज द UN डिकेड ऑन इकोसिस्टम रेस्टोरेशन. ओके, how does it balance ecological goals with emerging socio-economic needs like food security and development. Okay, so ecosystem restoration. So for example, a landscape has been degraded. Okay, that landscape probably was a wetland landscape, was a mangrove landscape, was a coral reef ecosystem, etc. Now we want to restore it to its native state. So what will be the process? Ecosystem restoration entails, okay, planting the native species to restore the landscape to native state. ठीक है, to original state. Okay. So soil restoration, replanting with the native species, so intact ecosystem, sustainable livelihoods, and reverting the climate change. So we are not only talking about afforestation. Afforestation is fine, but we are talking about planting the native species in that particular landscape so as to restore it to the original landscape. जैसे वो पहले था वैसे ही उसको रिस्टोर करना है. That is what is the concept of ecosystem restoration. Okay. Now, how does it balance the ecological goals with the emerging socio-economic needs? So please understand. Okay. Ecological goals are necessary. For example, net zero, etc. But there are socio-economic needs. So ecological goals are important. Okay. So what are the ecological goals? There are multiple ecological goals that we have set for us. Okay. That is, for example, inclusion of a particular percentage of energy from renewable resources. Okay. Inclusion of more energy through solar, wind. Okay. Net zero by a particular year for different countries. Reducing the consumption of fossil fuels, etc. So these are the different ecological goals. By ecosystem restoration, we are reducing the emissions. We are trying to fulfill the ecological goal, that is net zero, which is fine. But we are also talking about socio-economic needs. Okay. We cannot, okay, live in an ideal world where the ecosystems, they will be untouched. This is kind of a thought process that natural landscape, okay, that is completely away from the human settlements, which is an altered landscape, that is not true. Any landscape, for that matter of fact, any ecosystem, that is now an altered ecosystem. We are going for research in the Antarctic and Arctic region, so there is no landscape which is now not an altered landscape. So Lewis Mumford had also mentioned about this, that no city can be an ideal city, and if we are thinking about living in an ideal city, okay, then we are living in a dream world. So here what we are talking about is a landscape which is altered landscape. So that is why we are talking about socio-economic needs. We need to restore, but with also the fulfillment of food security, with fulfillment of our socio-economic needs. So ecological equilibrium with social desirability and economic viability also. Okay. So planning principle will be followed here, that is ecological equilibrium plus social desirability plus economic viability. So moving towards higher stages of Rostov growth, that is for sure. But in lines with ecological equilibrium. ये इस क्वेश्चन की डिमांड थी, अगर आपको समझ में आता है. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल वी हैड डन दिस क्वेश्चन वेयर वी हैड टेकन अप दिस केस स्टडी, that is efficacy of ecosystem restoration across, okay, Saharan desert. So you know about the great green wall concept, okay, that is also restoration. So that would restore the degraded lands and sequester a lot of carbon emissions. So that is restoration. China का भी similar concept है, green wall concept, which was in news very recently, okay, this year. So these were the examples that you could have used, okay. So that is balancing both the needs. So balancing both the needs, because we are talking about a reality, okay, not an ideal reality, because we also have our socio-economic needs, okay. So by 2050 there would be also issues associated with the food security, okay, climate change, which is happening at a very fast pace. So we must restore the landscape, but we must also take into consideration, okay, the food security aspects. We cannot compromise on that. Now next question, see, all the parts of this question, they could have been attempted because there could have been good content which could be given in these answers. अब ये आंसर देखो, इसमें कितना अच्छा कंटेंट आप लिख सकते थे. The Himalayas is still rising. Expand this statement and describe the processes involved, okay, in it with suitable sketches and example. Now see, compulsorily when there is a question where it is mentioned that you must illustrate, draw sketches, an example, draw diagrams. Sometimes they ask you give case studies, etc. Now in all of these questions बच्चों you must give diagrams, you must give sketches. अभी हमने पहले क्वेश्चन किया था नेपीज वाला, मैंने आपको क्या बोला था, आपके पास जो अच्छा कंटेंट बचेगा sketches वाला, diagrams वाला, CC compression, because you have to show the rising Himalayas, वो आप यहाँ पे बना सकते हो. Now see, because this is a 15 marker question, expand तो आप करोगे, okay, with the help of plate tectonics, okay, different type of collision, and this is rising, etc. ठीक है? So collision, don't start with CC collision, start with OC collision, because you would have the scope of inclusion of 2 diagrams here and probably 3 diagrams. कैसे? एक तो आप बना सकते हो start with plate tectonics, or probably start from okay Gondwana land, Laurentian, etc. Indian plate, and then okay collision and the consumption of the tethys sea. So OC collision का वहाँ scope आ जाएगा, okay, and then you can show the CC collision after that, and because of which the Himalayas have been rising. ठीक है? तो आप इसको थोड़ा सा chronologically खोलोगे, okay, open this answer chronologically. So mention sequential development of Himalayas, okay. So Laurasia and Gondwana land, okay, consumption of tethys sea, OC collision, and then CC collision, okay. CC collision, okay, CC collision. So in that manner, you can mention what has been the chronology of sequences of development and why this is rising. Then you can show with the recent collision and mention the time periods. That is very important. Okay. So starting maybe from pre-Cambrian, Cambrian, and later on, okay, then Carboniferous and like that. Ab timeline ek thoda sa de do. Okay, and then towards tertiary. In this manner, you will be able to substantiate, okay, what have been the sequential development in context of the geological developments in the historical past, and how now the collision that is leading to the rise of the Himalayas. ठीक है? इस तरीके से आप थोड़ा सा कर सकते हो start. And after the introduction, my suggestion will be the first diagram that you can give is OC collision. But here, बच्चों, it should be an elaborate, detailed diagram. I have seen so many scripts in the past 1 week, but I was not satisfied by the diagrams that you have drawn. अब जो diagram बना रहे हो ना, पता है कैसा diagram है? CC collision. Now please tell me, what does this signify? Neither you have labeled plate boundary or something like that, okay? So which could give me an idea that this diagram is drawn by a geography optional student. Now see, in this diagram, okay, this is OC collision. First of all, draw this diagram, then move towards CC collision and the rise of Himalayas. So subducting plate, okay. So you can mention the other aspects as well. Okay, for example, the batholith, okay. Then you can mention definitely trench, subduction zone, okay, oceanic sediments, accretionary arc, okay, sorry, accretionary terrains, okay. Then you can mention about just here very briefly the divergence and here the convergence, okay, like that you can mention, and mention the associated aspects of OC collision, okay. So here the terms, okay, that would be more important rather than just showing the OC collision, okay. तो वो important है आपका. And then the CC collision, continent-continent collision, and because of which the Himalayas are rising. Discuss the associated landforms, okay. that these are the recent formations, जिससे कि पता लगे कि ये rise कर रहा है, because this is still taking place. For example, the rise of the height of the Himalayas has been well acknowledged, okay, and very importantly the young landforms, youthful stage, okay. So hence in this manner, and probably you can also show the trans Himalayas, okay, in this context. CC collision, ये just add on कर सकते हो इस diagram में आप, okay. In this manner you can draw this diagram, and it is still rising, so it is also associated with deterministic, okay, aspects of, very importantly, okay, disasters and disaster management, because it is still rising, so it is associated with, okay, earthquakes, seismicity, landslides, avalanches, etc., floods and all of that, and probably you can mention some recent disasters, okay. So in that manner you can write this particular question. Now next question. Okay, what are the ecological consequences of agricultural deforestation in the Amazon and Congo basin, particularly concerning biodiversity and climate regulation? Now see, this question has been asked because IPCC's 6th report had mentioned about the tipping points, okay. This is a point of no return, you can say. So much of the devastation has been already done in an ecosystem that it is now at the point of no return back, okay. That is the tipping point. तो हमने एक ecosystem को इतना modify कर दिया है that we cannot bring it to its native state now. That is the idea of tipping point, and this will be applicable more in those ecosystems which are having lot of global repercussions if the changes are made in those ecosystems. So what will be those ecosystems which will have a very large scale, okay, repercussions, like the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, okay, like the Amazon basin. This had been highlighted by the IPCC 6th report. तो वहां पर अगर आप पढ़ोगे तो टिपिंग पॉइंट आपको टर्म मिल जाएगा. That is why this question has been asked, because these basins had been in news in the past 1 year. These regions have been in news. So what has happened is very simply that in these basins, okay, there has been expansion, clearance of the forest for agricultural activities, okay. So there has been a reduction in spatial area. Under these forests. So this is an example of LULC modification. Okay, this is a question from environmental geography, also entailing biogeography, okay, because this also involves a lot of changes in, okay, that native state of that ecosystem. These are rainforest ecosystems, bachcho, okay. So biodiversity reduction, implications on the biodiversity. So this is entailing both environmental geography and biogeography. Okay. Now you can see these reports. Okay, I have taken up the data from multiple reports and some good schematic diagrams which are published across different journals, and they were in news in the past 1 year. Okay? For example, this article was published in Monga Bay. This article shows, okay, the extent of total deforestation, which is very significant. This is the extent which is shown in the red color, okay, which is extending into the forested areas. This is total deforestation, you can see. Okay, so this is the total forest loss in the Amazon forest biome. Okay, and estimate of almost 13% has been lost due to deforestation. Very important. Okay, so this is Anthropocene. Okay. Now similarly, with respect to the Congo basin, you can see the new hotspots which have been shown in the red color, okay, intensifying hotspot in the maroon color, okay, persistent hotspots in the orange color, and yellow hotspots, okay, that is sporadic hotspots, okay, and green color is the primary forest. So again you can see there are so many hotspots of conversion which are shown in yellow, orange, etc. color, which is also signifying lot of diversion of the forested areas, again on the account of different activities, but primarily conversion towards agriculture on the account of increasing food insecurity and population expansion, okay. So remember, multiple countries, okay, which are still in the expanding stages of demographic transition. So here the food security and the demographic dividend, that has to be taken into consideration, okay. And also very importantly, these are the countries in the climbing ladder of the Rostov economic stages. So lot of conversion is still going to happen. तो ये सारे points आपको context को link करने हैं, पहली बात, okay. Now similarly there is another report which states, okay, for example you can see top 10 countries with respect to primary forest loss. So Brazil, DRC, Bolivia, etc. Okay. Now why we are talking only about these basins, particularly why it has been asked in this question, यही क्यों पूछा, क्यों, क्योंकि इसका impact बहुत large scale होगा, okay. So the impact of loss of these native forests will have lot of repercussions, be it in the context of biodiversity loss, be it in the context of temperature regulations, be it in context of atmospheric circulations, okay, temperature, precipitation, etc. We are not only talking about the tropical rainforest, but this is also the rising equatorial low pressure belt. Any repercussion here would have a larger repercussion on the atmospheric tricellular model. There will be regional repercussions, but also a global implication, okay. So this is the context, that is conversion of the agricultural land, etc. You could also give the context, okay, of Humboldt. So Humboldt during his voyages had acknowledged, okay, conversion of land, Lake Valencia, into agricultural land, okay. So this would give an integration of thoughts also in this answer, fine. Now see, all these repercussions that I am talking about, these will have very large scale implications for biodiversity, for the native species, and also because of the temperature modifications that would lead to a lot of invasion, migration of the species away from here, because now the ambient temperature conditions that would be, okay, also changed. There are particular temperature conditions, okay, which are required by the native species, but that would also be changed now in the coming time period. So we have seen migration of the species of different fishes already. We have already seen invasion of the species of certain fishes, for example around Madagascar, which has impacted the indigenous species. This is not alone on the account of changes in the temperature of the SST, but also on the account of land use conversion in the forested areas, which is driving the localized temperature and the precipitation changes, bachcho. So this is not alone zonally, this will also be, okay, meridionally. So all of these repercussions will be on a very large scale. Now I've talked about biodiversity. You can also include with respect to diversity in context of the tribals, okay, tribal population which is habitating these areas. So some of the areas might become non-acumene over a period of time, and etc. This can cause lot of out migrations also from this area, okay. And like we are seeing the conditions of flooding, outburst and all of that because of increased warming, and also zonally attributed with the tricellular model. So it is quite possible that it might witness cloud burst and all of that also very frequently, okay, flash floods like that. And climate regulation, and biodiversity. So I hope this is clear to you. Okay. Next, this is a direct question. It doesn't require much discussion. Examine the distribution and balance of energy in the Earth's atmosphere system. Climatology, heat budget. Okay, so this is very simple question. Heat budget आप discuss कर देते, but I think इसके साथ में आपको थोड़ा सा climate change का भी एक discussion add करना होगा. That there is a disruption of balance of energy because of increase in the greenhouse gases, and then what are the consequences and probably a solution. इस तरीके से आप इस क्वेश्चन को कर सकते हो, but this doesn't require any discussion. This is a simple question. Now next question, describe the process of formation of barrier island and explain its significance. Oceanography, ocean, okay, deposits and landforms. From geomorphology also you can link it with landforms. Now see, the landforms, okay, they can't be formed because of different agents, winds, fluvial action, action of waves, and because these agents, they are dominating in a particular type of okay, landscape, so hence that results into different type of the landforms. Here we are talking about waves. So waves which are operating in the coastal regions, so that leads to formation of different coastal landforms. Okay, which can be depositional and erosional. Okay, so coastal landforms, tumbolos, okay, then that can also lead to the formation of the barrier island as well. Okay, so there can be erosional and depositional landform, and the deposition can also lead to the formation of one of the landform, that is a barrier island. Okay, because of the action of the waves. Okay, so barrier island. Now this is a barrier island, you can see, probably like a barrier. Okay, so hence a barrier island. So this is a barrier island. So what is a barrier island? If we define it, it is a long, a narrow island. Okay, it is a long and a narrow island made of sand, okay, formed parallel to the mainland. So this is the mainland, and it is separated from the mainland by a lagoon, okay, a small shallow water body, okay, and it is separated by the mainland, okay, by a lagoon, formed parallel to the mainland coast by the action of waves and longshore currents, okay, by the action of waves and the longshore currents, okay, that protects the mainland from storms and waves. This is also an importance, because barrier islands that protect the mainland from storms, if the incoming wave that is having a high amplitude, so it also protects the coastal areas from the force of storms and waves by acting as a natural barrier. So probably called a barrier island. Okay, so that can protect the mainland areas and the coastal settlements, agriculture from inundation of the sea water. Okay, that is also one of their important significance. But because of the unsustainable urbanization nowadays, there are a lot of implications on the barrier island systems. Okay. Now see, so barrier islands, as we have discussed, okay, they develop most easily on wave dominated coast with small to moderate tidal ranges. So tidal range must be small to medium. Okay, there must be a relatively low gradient shelf so as to allow deposition of the sediments also. Okay, otherwise the sand accumulation into a sandbar would not occur and instead would be dispersed. Okay, so gradient is also important factor. I am talking about factors. Okay, next, ample sediment supply should also be there. Okay, if the ample sediment supply would not be there, then again there would be not adequate deposition. So it includes the fluvial deposit. And another last condition required is a stable sea level. Okay, so hence it would lead to deposition parallel to the mainland. Okay, so this would lead to the formation of a barrier island. Because of the prevailing longshore current. Okay. Now, there are different concepts which have been proposed. One of the important one had been given way back in 1800s, okay, which had been given by Elie de Beaumont. Okay, and he believed that waves moving into shallow water, okay, that churned up the sand, which was deposited in the form of a submarine bar, and when the waves broke and lost much of their energy leading to deposition, as the bars developed vertically, they gradually rose above the sea level, forming the barrier island. So with the action of waves, there has been the formation of the barrier island. Now there have been different barrier islands which have been witnessed, especially along the eastern coast of North America, along the Gulf Coast of Florida, okay, and also including the north and south anklote bars associated with the anklote key. Okay, you can just give example. Okay, shell key, etc. One or two will be sufficient. Okay. Now, very importantly, barrier islands, they themselves are very fragile. And just imagine the area which we are talking about. Okay, that is around the east coast of North America. Okay, there is also one around the coast of Kerala, that is Vipin Island, V-Y-P-I-N, Vipin Island, and one important one that we are talking about is Padre Island. Okay, so across India, Vipin, ये भी आप example में लिख सकते हो, ठीक है. Now Padre Island. Now see, there are two contexts here that we are trying to develop. First is they themselves, they are fragile, and secondly, okay, yes, they provide a defense against the natural disasters, but they themselves are fragile. And the area where we are talking about that has witnessed lot of conurbation development, lot of settlements development and expansion in the past few decades. So hence this is a dichotomy which has been created here. That is, these islands, they are ecologically fragile, okay, and they are witnessing a lot of unsustainable urbanization. So just last year I had read this article on urbanization and barrier islands. Okay, that is, they protect coastline by absorbing energy and create areas of protected waters where wetlands may flourish, etc. Okay, and Padre Islands का भी इसमें बात हुआ है, of Texas, US. Okay, but very importantly, these areas, okay, that is around Gulf Coast of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, etc., they are witnessing, okay, certain expansion of the urbanization, and those cities, okay, that are located wholly or largely on the barrier island. So that is a context, okay, that is, okay, of concern कि वहाँ पे जो expansion हो रहा है वो बहुत sustainable नहीं है क्योंकि ecologically fragile areas है. So ये एक article था, I think 1 year back, okay, that is the large cities in North America which are located on the barrier island, okay, they are witnessing expansion, and localized planning efforts associated with the developed barrier islands must also take into consideration the regional impacts on such barrier islands that might actually lead to an impact on their survival. Okay, सो ये एक आर्टिकल था, इसमें कंटेक्स्ट आपका थोड़ा सा डेवलप हो जाएगा, दैट इज जियोमॉर्फोलॉजी, एनवायरमेंटल ज्योग्राफी, ओशियोनोग्राफी एंड ऑल्सो वर्सेस द अनसस्टेनेबल एक्सपेंशन इनटू द एरियाज. ओके, सो ये एक आर्टिकल था, इसमें कुछ प्लेसेस भी न्यूज में थे, तो ये आप अच्छे से इसमें इंक्लूड कर सकते हो. नाउ नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन, दैट इज सेक्शन बी. ओके, लेट्स स्टार्ट द डिस्कशन अराउंड सेक्शन बी. Now one difference that you would see here, okay, that is section A versus section B. Here the questions are definition type, straightforward questions. Although you can develop certain interlinkages, but in section B, you have lot of scope of interlinking the concepts. Okay, you would understand that with the help of डिस्कशन ऑन सेक्शन बी. और सेक्शन बी पे आप बहुत ज़्यादा ध्यान देना, क्योंकि इस डिस्कशन के बाद आपको क्लियर हो जाएगा कि कैसे ये आंसर जो आप नहीं अटेम्प्ट कर पाते थे पहले, इसमें आप कैसे थॉट्स, थिंकर्स, ओके, सेक्शन ए से कुछ पार्ट इंक्लूड करके एक्सेट्रा, हाउ यू आर एबल टू मेक दीज आंसर्स ज्योग्राफिकल इन पर्सपेक्टिव. ठीक है, थॉट्स वगैरह के आंसर तो वैसे ही बन जाएंगे आपके ज्योग्राफिकल, बट उसके अलावा सारे आंसर्स कैसे आप बहुत ज्यादा ज्योग्राफी ऑप्शनल के बना पाते हो. ओके, लेट्स स्टार्ट द डिस्कशन. फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, व्हाई डिड वेलफेयर अप्रोच इन ह्यूमन ज्योग्राफी emerge as a significant perspective in 1970s? Question is very straightforward. Why it had become significant now? Do not just beat around the bush. बहुत स्पेसिफिकली पूछा जा रहा है, ये अब क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट हो गया? बिकॉज ऑफ द पास्ट हिस्टोरिकल डेवलपमेंट्स. सबसे पहले कंटेक्स्ट देना पड़ेगा. व्हाई वेलफेयर अप्रोच हैड बिकम इंपॉर्टेंट? बिकॉज नाउ वी वर क्वेश्चनिंग हु गेट्स व्हाट, वेयर एंड हाउ. दिस क्वेश्चन हैड बिकम इंपॉर्टेंट नाउ. दिस वाज नॉट एन इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन हिथरटू. तो वहां से कंटेक्स्ट डेवलप करना होगा. आपको स्टार्ट करना होगा लेट 1800s. एक स्कीमेटिक डायग्राम बनाओ, फ्लो चार्ट, to justify why it had become important in 1970s. Why? Because 1800s, early 1900s, 1950s, 1970s, the objectives of geography were different. Here the objective of geography was not who gets what, where and how. Geography was itself emerging as an independent subject. हमारा objective ही पहले था, geography should emerge as an individual independent subject. What we will study in geography, that was the important objective then. We were still discussing should geography study physical or human. When the objective itself was not, okay, that who gets what, where and how, then how could welfare approach be important in this time period, right? So here tell the significant perspective was what would be the subject matter of geography. Here early 1900s, okay, that is regional versus spatial analysis. So geography was regional in approach, okay. So significant perspective was regional approach, okay. Then here areal differentiation, chronological approach, and here now the quantification becomes an important approach, okay. So quantification and spatial analysis is important. Now 1970s, emergence of inequalities, disparities, environmental degradation, gender disparities, okay, inequalities as an outcome of World War II. Now by 1970s, we are questioning who gets what, where and how, okay. So here, okay, the elements of how socio-political economic system operate, D.M. Smith, okay, who gets what, where and how. Now please elaborate the interpretation of who is who, okay, who can be In context of gender inequality, who can be have and have nots, like that. Gets what can be food security, environmental degradation, etc. Where, okay, where can be developed countries, developing countries, etc. How are the processes? Okay, so in his Human Geography, a welfare approach, quote his work, he suggested the approach which later emerged with other approaches of geography dealing with the issues of inequality. So by 1970s, we are not concerned with the location of market places. तो ये सारा वर्क आपको कोट करना पड़ेगा. Okay. So historical background, chronology of development, and by 1970s, we were not concerned with the location of marketplaces. Geographer should act as prophet, diagnostician, and architect. Who gets what, where, and how? Basically, the idea was role of geography was changing. Okay. Should be similar to medicine, that is to postpone death. Okay. So location, not location of marketplaces, industries, we are not interested in that anymore. Okay. Now in the real life scenario, we are not talking about the location of industries, settlements, we are more concerned with the rising inequalities as a repercussion of the Second World War, as an outcome of which there has been certain areas which are facing environmental degradation, where there has been rapid industrial, okay, development, industrial evolution, right? So we are talking about the changing role of geography, that is the welfare approach now. So now you can quote thinkers like Zelensky, Kasperson, okay, Smith, etc. Okay, role of geographer as a diagnostician, prophet, architect, etc. to diagnose the problems and provide a solution. Now because the emerging situation is such that all the other subjects have emerged as interdisciplinary, so geography should also become interdisciplinary in approach, and the perspective in geography should change. So that is how you will write this answer. You will not write a short note on welfare approach, because then the answer would be wrong. You should tell the changing objectives of geography, how they have changed chronologically, and now by 1970s and 80s, how the socio-economic, political, environmental scenarios, they were changing, and now that is why we were talking about Montreal Protocol. That is why now we are concerned with the ozone hole depletion. We are talking about Chipko movement, and then gradually moving forward, we are talking about our goals. Okay, that is environmental goals की बारे में हम बात कर रहे हैं. ठीक है? So what are the goals with respect to the renewable energy contribution in the total energy generation? We are talking about the rising sea level, biodiversity loss, etc. These are the changing objectives of geography which one must look into as a geographer. Okay, so these concerns become important from 1960s, 70s. That is why roles of geographer should also change. Here you can also quote some of the works, okay, like Rachel Carson, ठीक है, लिमिट्स टू ग्रोथ, ये सब भी आप थोड़ा सा इसको कोट कर सकते हो यहाँ पे. ओके, Rachel Carson, limits to growth, these works, okay, limits to growth, Meadows, okay, Silent Spring, etc. You can quote here. Okay, so here my suggestion will be give a chronological development of the concept. Okay, how the objectives in geography were changing, but also you can include some of the other thinkers who had talked about, okay, this approach, that is there are inequalities and we should address it. For example, even Humboldt, Reckless, okay, they had mentioned about this. Humboldt had mentioned about inequalities, Reckless also had talked about inequalities. So just give a brief, okay, reference about that, and then the objectives, how they were changing, and post-war scenario, how, who gets what, where, and how becomes important. Okay. Next question. What are the key environmental and economic challenges linked to the extraction and processing of the critical minerals? Very simple, environmental and economic challenges. अब सीधा तो नहीं start कर दोगे, these are the challenges. So in introduction, just define what are the critical minerals and its distribution. Okay. In the distribution itself, one of the challenge lies, that is with respect to extraction, our dependencies on the imports, okay, and how the major concentration with respect to, okay, this is the proportion of the extraction, so which is very high, disproportionately high. This is China, okay, this is US and the other countries. So China, okay, the over dependence on China, the distribution across China, okay, so that is one of the major concerns. तो start तो हम वहीं से कर देंगे, okay, that is define and distribution. Now why we are talking about critical minerals time and again? Okay, first of all, because there is a transition which is required, because we need to move away from the traditional resources on which we were dependent upon, because we are talking about clean energy transition. Again, you can quote new Malthusian challenges which had emerged, and the resources which are limited. So hence we need to transition to clean energy. Okay, so clean energy technologies like solar, okay, PV systems, electric vehicles, wind turbines, etc. This transition that requires the usage of critical minerals, and that is why critical minerals are important. Okay, these technologies rely heavily on a range of raw materials known as critical minerals, okay, because of the quantity in which they are found. That is why the term critical. Okay, now because we are talking about carbon emissions reduction, okay, so World Bank has given us certain data. World Bank estimates that about 3 billion tons of critical minerals will be needed to decarbonize the global energy system by 2050, with the production of minerals such as graphite, lithium and cobalt needed to increase by nearly 500% by 2050 to meet the energy for, okay, clean energy development. आप समझ रहे हो? ये critical mineral कहाँ से आएगा? Okay, either from those resources, okay, the reserves which have been explored, which are still unexplored, which have a potential. Okay, so यहीं से हमारे challenges emerge हो जाते हैं. Although we require, okay, lot of critical mineral utilization for clean energy transition, we want to transit towards organic unity. Okay, now you can use the term Zusammenhang, okay, or Naturagangsen. I had told you in beginning that the concept of organic unity, which we had used in the first question, I think Humboldt, the same concept is that of organic unity. Naturagangsen term अलग use कर दो, अब रिटर लिख दो, ठीक है? Zusammenhang या Naturagangsen, you can use either Humboldt or Ritter earlier or Humboldt or Ritter here. Okay, it is up to you. Now, even though we want to transit towards clean energy, okay, Naturagangsen approach, Zusammenhang approach, but the problem is that the reserves which have been explored till yet, a majority of them are concentrated in China, in few countries, right? The other reserves, they are being still found out. ठीक है, काफी सारा discovery हो रहा है अभी. We are still finding out. That is in nascent stage. We do not know how many of the reserves that would actually have a potential for scientific exploration, commercial utilization. Commercially utilize करने के लिए भी तो potential होना चाहिए. That is also one of the challenge, because the technologies for mapping and harnessing the potential of those resources is still at a very nascent stage. Okay, so that is one context. So we have limited technical expertise and financial resources for developing deep-seated mineral deposits. Okay, limited scales of operations and lack of investments in the processing technologies. Okay, difficulties in procuring the raw materials both domestically and internationally. So hence, now you need to make this answer geographical in nature. We need to promote technology diffusion. We need to promote the cornucopian intervention. Okay, so use the terms like diffusion of technology. Okay, Hagerstrand. Cornucopian intervention. So by promoting the diffusion of technology, we will be able to overcome these challenges. And that is how we are going to harness the potential of hitherto unexplored critical minerals. Okay, so promoting technological innovation, supporting research and development of advanced and sustainable processing technologies, diffusion of technology. Very importantly, supply chain of critical minerals will become more important in the global economy. Now we should also talk about geopolitics. So wherever there will be more and more discoveries of the critical minerals, that would also influence the geopolitics. Please understand, okay, the global economy and geopolitics. Here we are talking about certain important fundamental aspects, okay, that is energy resources, mineral resources, okay, and technological interventions. So energy resources, mineral resources, technological interventions, that is going to influence the global geopolitics or not? Yes. So that is also going to influence the global geopolitics in a manner that these will be crucially linked to moving the countries into higher stages of Rostov and dispersion of the industries, right? So that was also one of the primary reason, okay, because of which the first industrial revolution that was successful in a particular region. Now the global geopolitics will be interplay of things, where one important factor would be critical minerals geopolitics. Okay, so those countries which will have a dominant control, which would also influence the geopolitical scenario, because we are talking about the clean energy development. Okay, so this answer could be an interplay of these concepts. This is not a straightforward question only about critical minerals, okay, challenges and etc. This is about economic geography. This is about, okay, geopolitical aspects, and this is also about regional development and planning. Okay, if you could have interlinked it with these concepts, then you could have linked it with the other concepts as well. For example, core periphery. Okay, so development of the periphery in the core periphery world system theory. Okay, so in this manner you could have written this particular answer very well. So for example, in Geographica we had taken up this, so Geographica current affairs magazine, which was given to you, okay, for the mains batch. There we had discussed this article. Okay, so here we are talking about the northern sea route, okay, etc. And this article, it focuses on Russian Arctic is a trove of unexplored energy and critical mineral reserves, strategic deposits. Okay, and very importantly, important for diversification of these resources, isn't it so? So this is geopolitics at play, because we won't be dependent on one particular country for the supply of these minerals. So this is energy diversification, resources diversification, mineral diversification, and in those areas which have not been explored currently, there will be multiple other repercussions. We are not going into that, but we are talking about the geopolitical scenario and how it is going to influence this context, that is the critical minerals. Okay, very importantly, अंडर geopolitics and international law, deep sea mining in Indo-Pacific. ठीक है, इसमें भी हमने थोड़ा सा इसके बारे में बात किया था. Okay, this article also, it was talking about this. So world is looking at potential geopolitical and environmental point of conflict which will affect every country. The dispute stems from a search for critical minerals in the deep sea. Okay, so exploring these minerals in those areas which are hitherto unexplored, this would also be one of the challenges, isn't it? So although it would be one potential, but this would be a challenge also, because this would lead to confrontations and conflicts also. Okay, and when we will be exploring these areas, there will be global environmental repercussions, okay, etc. All of that is understandable. I am discussing only those points which might be new to you. ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से करके आप इसको थोड़ा सा रिमलैंड के साथ में भी लिंक कर सकते थे. ओके, next question, an interesting question. Now let's see what the question is asking you. Pull factors in internal migration are often based on perceptions rather than reality. Explain. Okay, so this is from population geography and migration, but this is also from thoughts, perspectives, concept of mental maps. Now what the question is stating? Question is stating about pull factors in internal migration. Okay, so we are very much aware of different migration theories. Okay, so migration theories in which one important concept is proposed by Lee, push-pull. So here the question is on pull migration, pull factors of migration. Okay, so pull factors of migration, that is a particular place attracts migrants from peripheral areas because this destination is acting as a magnet. Now the question is, it is a magnet, is it a perception or a reality? Okay, this is the question. So a person who is moving from rural areas to the urban areas is because of their own perception about that area. Urban area would have a higher source of income. Okay, so because of economic reasons, a person is migrating because of higher order of social capillarity. To move into higher order of social capillarity, one is moving into urban areas, but probably that might be a perception and not a reality. Let's see that. Okay, now you have to link it with the concept of the mental map. So what is my perception? My perception is economic factors for migration, better living standards, career advancements, okay, diversified cultural environment in tourist places, okay, conflict prone nahi hai, environmental stability hai, and etc. That might be my perception. Reality might be different. My perception is because of my mental maps. Okay, that is the image that I create in my mind that influences my decision and my behavior. Okay. Now please understand that my perception has been created because somebody else migrated. Because my perception is that this is necessarily going to happen. That is, in the coastal areas, rising sea level would inundate the coastal areas. So probably I should migrate to inland urban area. But currently, in the past 1 month, the inland urban areas are witnessing so many floods. Probably the coastal areas are not witnessing as many floods, right? So that might have been my perception, not a reality, because the climatic changes are going to have repercussions in all the areas. So here you could have discussed the answer very beautifully with the concept of mental maps. How it influences my migration, push-pull migration, but reality might be different. So push-pull migration, mental maps. Okay. For example, and very importantly, when we are talking about my mental maps, okay, so you can also associate it with behavioral geography. You can link it with Walpert. Because there was a reference in his works about migration, that migration might be influenced by a person's behavior. Okay. So for example, not necessarily for economic reasons, but because of the age factor, because, okay, not alone of the economic reason, but because the family, entire family wants to migrate to a particular area, because for personal reasons, peaceful atmosphere, etc., there might be reasons for migration. Okay, migration to hilly areas, isolated environment, etc. Not be as per the push-pull migration. Okay, so push-pull migration that is happening, that is because of my perception. I feel that region, okay, might be having better economic opportunities, but that might be my perception, and it might not be a reality. Okay, and the reality might be that in urban areas where you have migrated, where the migration happened, they're not having better environmental conditions, they are witnessing urban floods. Okay, so that is how you need to justify it. That is, my decision about migration is influenced by my own perception. Okay, so my mental map has influenced my behavior, behavioral decision for migration. And also, for example, the scenario that we had witnessed, okay, in 1960s and 70s, because everybody was moving to Western countries, so there was a lot of out-migration of doctors and engineers. But now we have seen counter-migration, they are returning back because of improvement in the economic conditions in India as well. Okay, so because there are now better income opportunities in India and the demographic dividend is here. Okay, the market demand is here, so we have seen return of doctors and engineers, a lot of entrepreneurship activities happening here. So that was the perception, now this is a reality. Okay, इस तरीके से आप इस question को deal कर सकते हो. Okay, now this question is very interesting because you have a lot of content in these questions. Please understand, when we say this question is good and bad and etc. is in context of आपके पास कितना कंटेंट है उसको अटेम्प्ट करने के लिए. कुछ क्वेश्चन बहुत अच्छे हैं बट कंटेंट ही नहीं है, उसमें क्या जस्टिफाई करोगे, दैट इज द क्वेश्चन. ओके, नाउ इन दिस क्वेश्चन you would have lot of content. Please understand, by now you would have known फॉर एग्जाम्पल व्हेन वी डेल्ट विद द क्वेश्चन ऑन क्लाइमेटोलॉजी, हमने क्या देखा, एक क्वेश्चन आया अराउंड एयर मासेस, एक क्वेश्चन अराउंड ट्राई सेल्यूलर मॉडल, और एक हीट बजट वाला शायद आप नहीं करते, तो ये दो क्वेश्चन थे. Although the question is around only tricellular and air masses, but you have so much content in climatology. Where will you show that? The question on monsoon is not here, but you know the concept, you know the mechanism. Can I interlink it there? They haven't asked you question on upper tropospheric circulation. You need to integrate it there. Similarly, you must see the analysis video where I have discussed what is the weightage of each unit in individual sections across paper 1 and 2. Okay. So you must know what are the questions directly from RDP. Hardly there are less question this year from RDP, which are from RDP alone, क्योंकि पेरुक्स भी आपका मॉडल्स के साथ में इंटीग्रेट हो जाता है, पेरुक्स वाला क्वेश्चन. अच्छा, अब इस क्वेश्चन में आपके पास एक दो क्वेश्चन ही तो है और आपके पास RDP के इतने सारे कंसेप्ट्स हैं, कोर फेरी फेरी है, ठीक है, क्यूमुलेटिव कॉजेशन है, ग्रोथ पोल है, एक्सेट्रा. कहाँ लगाओगे? वो ऐसे ही आंसर्स में लगा के आपको इंटीग्रेट करना पड़ेगा. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन द लास्ट क्वेश्चन विच वाज ऑन माइग्रेशन थ्योरीज, ओके, they have specifically asked you a question on Lee, which is fine. You know about the other concepts, Rubinstein's, 2,4, etc. Now you can integrate it here and discuss this in context of perception and reality or not. The reality is that it is not push and pull. It is because of Stuffer's intervening opportunity. समझ में आ रहा है? तो आपने Stuffer को भी लिंक कर दिया. Like that you must attempt these answers. If you are not able to interlink the concepts, then you will get scores around 220 to 40. Now regional imbalances are the product of in situ and ex situ factors. Elucidate it with examples. Okay. So regional imbalances, in situ and ex situ. ठीक है. अब इसको ध्यान दो बच्चों, इसको हम डिटर्मिनिस्टिक भी कह सकते हैं एंड पॉसिबिलिस्टिक. आप देखो, मैं आपको दो मैप से समझाती थी, वो पूरा आंसर आपको समझ में आएगा. मैप्स का क्या इंपॉर्टेंस है इन आंसर्स में. इन सिटू, बिकॉज दैट पर्टिकुलर रीजन इटसेल्फ डिड नॉट हैड द अपॉर्चुनिटीज for regional development. So in situ factors, deterministic factors, locational disadvantage, interiors, okay, that is located, although has resources but has not been able to develop proportionately because it is located in the interiors, in the hinterland, connectivity nahi hai with the sea routes. Okay, so that is why probably in the question when the context of the rimland came up, why Spikeman was emphasizing on accessibility to sea routes, because heartland although is a fortress but it does not has accessibility to sea routes, and we have seen that in case of Russia, Ukraine or not. Yes, expansion of Russia. Now see, this year the question on rimland and heartland was not asked, but in previous question also and in this question also we are linking this concept. So you must know how to interlink the concepts बच्चों. So product of in situ factor because it is a heartland region. इस तरीके से आपको ये आंसर खोलना था. Heartland, lack of accessibility to sea, okay. Climatic determinism. So that is why I have shown this map. Okay, you can show certain desert areas, ठीक है, leeward side of the mountains, ड्राई रेंज हेडो एरियाज, ठीक है. से आप छोटे छोटे केस स्टडीज ले सकते हो, मराठवाड़ा, सहारन रीजन, सेंट्रल एशियन रीजन, ठीक है, हार्टलैंड रीजन, एक्सेट्रा. डिस्पैरिटी बिटवीन ईस्ट एंड वेस्टर्न एक्सेट्रा, ठीक है, स्पेशली ऑस्ट्रेलिया, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, ठीक है. दिस इज क्लाइमेटिक डिटर्मिनिज्म, ठीक है, जोग्राफिकल डिटर्मिनिज्म. अब उसमें आप थिंकर्स लिख सकते हो, आपकी मर्जी है, आप रैट्जेल लिखो, एक्सेट्रा. Include thinkers from German, American school of thought and all of that. Okay. So in situ factors, climatic determinism, lack of resources, resources है but hinterland area है, connectivity नहीं है, ठीक है, and etc. Agriculture prosperous नहीं है, fertile soils नहीं है. This is all the reason associated with in situ determinism, ex situ determinism. Okay. For example, lack of technological diffusion. Lack of technology diffusion. So one region has grown disproportionately large and another region is lagging behind. Okay, so this can be also because of historical factors. Okay, so historical factors, there was hierarchical diffusion. Okay, industrial revolution. Okay, from Western Europe towards Eastern Europe towards colonies, and in those countries, those areas where there was not historical diffusion. अब देखो इंडिया के context में ले लेते हैं. Metropolitan regions, okay, large concentration of population around coastal areas, Mumbai, okay, Chennai, etc. And whereas when we compare it with the interiors, Bundelkhand, Marathwada, so that is less, okay, proportionately less developed. So regional imbalances हो गया, ठीक है? So this is ex situ, that is possibilistic. Okay. So here ex situ technology diffusion हो गया, industrial diffusion हो गया, historical time से, ठीक है? तो ये एक लिंक बन गया आपका. And these regional imbalances, they are in form of the core periphery currently. There is primacy around those areas which are disproportionately better developed. इसमें तो हमने बात करी ना कि कहाँ डेवलपमेंट नहीं हुआ, कहाँ हुआ, वो भी तो बताओगे. प्राइमेसी कहाँ पे है? कहाँ क्यूमुलेटिव कॉजेशन हुआ? Where there is agglomeration, clustering of industries. Okay. So possibilism में आप बोल सकते हो, बिग पुश मॉडल भी बोल सकते हो. हमने क्लास में इसको डिस्कस किया था, बिग पुश मॉडल, where there has been deliberate big push model, so implementation. So here also there has been disproportionately larger infrastructure development, and this has been a pyramid center. Okay, for example, some parts of Africa, okay, some countries in Africa have witnessed this big push model. Okay, so possibilism. So this has resulted into regional imbalances, core periphery, cumulative causation. अब आप इसी मैप में सब कुछ दिखा सकते थे, इन situ ex situ करके दो सिंबल्स बना लेते, because of in situ factor star, ex situ factor circle, and disproportionately large development, okay, metropolitan areas, etc. And there is less proportionate development, okay, like that you can mention. ठीक है, इस तरीके से आप ये आंसर को कर सकते हो. Okay, and industrial agglomerations, clustering also, marshland industrial district, ये सारे concept आपके लग जाएंगे. ठीक है, so imbalances और solution के लिए last में दे देना. Okay, reducing the imbalances, okay, by spread diffusion of technology, etc. case study आप ले सकते हो चाइना का. So this is showing over years, okay, 2013, 17, 21, you can see that the digital economy concentration, this is a case study which is showing the digital economy development, okay, around the coastal area. So this has been disproportionately larger concentration only in the coastal areas. इसका तो हमने case study बहुत बार किया भी है classes में. Okay, so coastal areas conurbation. Now next question is very nice question, because lot of interlinkages can be developed. System analysis, okay, important in urban planning, and what are its limitation. ऐसे क्वेश्चंस को करने के लिए ना आपको पहले क्वेश्चन की डिमांड समझनी पड़ेगी. So systems analysis, so one part is systems analysis, urban planning, and what are its limitations. Now see, we are talking about an urban region, ठीक है? Now for example, I am talking about a primate city. Let's say we are talking about satellite towns. We are talking about 8 cities. Now my question to you is urban planning. We are talking about urban planning, simple, right? So planning for an urban area. Okay. Now we will also include the different models of urban morphology here itself. I will tell you. First of all, understand we are talking about an urban area. Okay. Now this urban area would have, okay, different settlements of different hierarchical order or not? Yes. There would be a primate center, there might be some edge cities, there might be some, okay, maybe satellite towns, etc. So there would be hierarchy of order of settlements. Okay. Now when I am planning for an urban area, should I plan alone for a primate center? Should I plan alone for an edge city or for a satellite town? Or should I plan for the larger urban area? Okay. The idea should be I should plan for the larger urban area. That is why we have the planning principles like the space-time continuum, right? So if I am planning for this area in an integrated manner, is this not a system which is, okay, interdependent subsystems which are dependent upon one another? Yes. So I should consider this urban area as an entire system, and that is why the concept of system analysis. So this is system analysis first point. That is, I should consider this as an integrated subsystems in a larger system. And similarly, this would be just one system. There would be other integrated systems. Okay, another system which would be, okay, entirely inside a state, which is a larger system, and then inside a country and inside a larger region like South Asian region. So these are all systems, okay, and which are having subsystems and interlinkages of subsystems. So this is first aspect of systems analysis. Second aspect of system analysis would be when I am talking about, let's say, the primate city itself. Within the primate center or within a satellite town also, isn't there an interlinkages of the subsystems? Because we are talking about interlinkages of atmosphere. Okay, we are talking about interlinkages like atmosphere, biosphere, okay, hydrological systems. Okay, so hence now also we are talking about interlinkages of the different systems. We cannot deal with the water resources separately. I cannot deal with the atmospheric processes separately. Okay, so here second aspect of system would be, this is the first aspect of system, that is, okay, interlink hydrosphere, geosphere, biosphere, etc. and also with the noosphere, which is mental image, okay, of that landscape by man. When I integrate all those spheres, now this is the second aspect of system. Okay, so one system is when we are talking about the individual, okay, entity, that is one particular city or one particular town or one particular village. And second, okay, systems analysis approach would be applied when I am taking into consideration this as an entire system. This entire urban area is also system, where I cannot, okay, plan for rural areas, rural villages, okay, in silos away from the urban areas. We need to plan in an integrated approach. And when we are talking about integrated approach, we are also talking about space-time continuum. So this is the applicability, but the challenge would be Unfortunately, the primate center has developed on its own. Okay, historically the chronological order of development has been such that it has sprawled already into the 8 cities, and we are witnessing floods like Gurgaon floods now, because we unfortunately did not take into consideration this as in system analysis approach. So we are having Gurgaon floods, we are having floods in Punjab, we are having floods in Uttarakhand, etc. We are having Texas floods, floods all over the world. Okay, because we were not taking into consideration either this system analysis or this system analysis. Okay, so this is the challenge, that it has already developed, it has already sprawled. Probably this concept can be applied to those areas which are still in the nascent stages of development, or okay, partially we can apply it in gentrification wherever it is possible, but the challenge remains that it is very limitedly applicable. कैसे इसको apply कर सकते हैं where the already the models which have developed are so complicated now. Okay, like the vertical growth which has happened in Gurgaon, which we are seeing now currently. A lot of concretization has already happened. This could have taken into consideration in 1950s and 60s probably. Okay, so that is one aspect, but very importantly, okay, when we are talking about this approach, right, so this is taking into consideration the urban area, the entire urban planning as a system. So here you can also apply urban morphology models, that is, this is multi-nuclei. So system analysis for multi-nuclei approach. Okay, we do not want to create a mono center, we want to create a multi-nuclei center. So easily we can apply the urban morphology models also here. Okay, so systems analysis in urban planning is a methodological approach that views cities as interconnected systems. They are not silos, to understand complex relationships, identify problems and develop solutions for urban development and sustainability. I hope this is clear to you. By studying components like land use, okay, what will be the land use? Will it be horizontal? Will it be vertical land use? Transportation systems, very importantly, system analysis has been used across some parts, for example across Indonesia and transportation. And infrastructure, planners can model dynamic interactions, stimulate the future outcomes and create policies for improved urban livability and efficient resource management. You can quote, okay, Shorley, Haggett, Berry, etc. Okay, this is what I meant. Urban systems taking into consideration physical landscape but also socio-economic development, infrastructure, transportation, communities. Okay, so that is very important. So we must take into consideration social, economic, environmental aspects for the urban development, taking into consideration this as a system. Okay, hydrosphere, biosphere, noosphere, etc. Okay, so social aspects, for example, okay, we are talking about public infrastructure, public libraries. Okay, we are talking about the HDI indices of the population, etc., economy, okay, per capita income, industries and all of that, environment, landscaping, biophilic urbanism, etc. So this is system approach for that particular area. Okay, and very importantly, then we are designing that urban area on the basis of which, okay, baseline analysis, design ideas, design solution, design evaluation, etc., and then the design development on the basis of system analysis. Okay, here this is what we mean by multi-centric approach and the system analysis. So multi-centric means, so here we have multiple centers. This is not monocentric development, this is an entire system, okay, taking into consideration the different orders of hierarchy of urban settlements. Okay, this is multi-center, multi-centric approach. So we have shown you an urban agglomeration, urban metropolitan region. Okay, this is metropolitan region. Okay, so this is city center and smaller hierarchical order settlements. So in this manner we can plan for transportation, land use, industrial development, agglomerations, etc. in metropolitan regions with the help of system analysis. So in this manner you can attempt this question. This question was a very nice question. If you wanted to flaunt your geography optional, एग्जामिनर को बस दिखा देना है कि ये भी पता है, ये भी पता है geography optional में, तो ये आंसर से अच्छा आंसर हो ही नहीं सकता. And I think most of the students must have done this question. How have dichotomy and dualisms affected the methodological development of geography? Now very important term here is methodological development. You must use this again and again in your answers. Okay, now see, in this answer I would suggest since the question is on dualism and dichotomy, in introduction itself you can start from traces from Greeks, Romans, Arabs, okay, and specifically Varenius and Kant. This should be the order of sequential development of the answer. ठीक है, introduction में आप बोल सकते हो there are traces of dualisms and dichotomies, okay, in the works of Greeks, Romans, Arabs, etc. But then moving towards Varenius and Kant, okay, moving towards Varenius and Kant, we see the development of this concept of dualism concretely, because Varenius had mentioned about dualism, right? Varenius had mentioned about dualism. He did not divide strictly geography into this or that. He had just mentioned geography can be special geography and general geography. So here you can mention this dualism, that is general and special geography. And geography as exceptionalist stance. That is chronological approach in geography. Now from here you can give the sequential development, that is Varenius, Kant, then Humboldt, Ritter. And once the crisis period begins, then we have the discussions about what should geography study. So here stands the dichotomies, and after this you must discuss about, okay, crisis phase, human versus physical, regional, okay, versus general, possibilism versus determinism, and include thinkers from different schools of thought, German, okay, French, American school. This is how you would get an answer differentiated from the others. Do not forget the American school of thought also, because there are references in the works of, okay, Huntington, Calsor, Semple, etc. You must include in these discussions. So start from the content in geography, okay, that was debated whether it is human versus physical. Okay, here you must talk about Oscar Peschel, George Gerland, etc. And then you must move towards determinism, possibilism, okay, German and French school of thought, and also quote the works, anthropogeography, okay, of Ratzel, etc. You must quote these works. Then move towards regional and systematic analysis, and then the resolution with quantitative revolution, Hartshorn-Schoffer and resolution. And in resolution you must talk about quantitative revolution. You must talk about quantitative revolution, okay, the resolution of dichotomies with Hartshorn-Schoffer debates. So methodological development, very important, because at a point of time there was a question in geography. Geography should be regional. What should be the approach? Should it be ideographic or mnemothetic? Okay, So support the argument with the substantial works of different thinkers. Okay, so starting from German school of thought, then subsequently moving toward the other schools of thought, what has been the methodological development? Why we were thinking that geography should be physical geography? Okay, why geography should not be human geography? Then how these dichotomies have led to the methodological development. For example, resolution in the works. Okay, for example, stop and go determinism, Griffith Taylor. Now the methodological development is geography should be a midway between determinism and possibilism, like that. Okay, geography should be both human and physical in the works of Redzel, in the works of Vidal, Hartshorne. Like that, you must discuss the methodological developments in geography with the help of the dualisms and dichotomies. And how now, after quantitative revolution, we are talking about geography to be, okay, quantitative revolution, geography, now the methodological developments in geography are away from these dichotomies, because geography is both regional, spatial, human, physical, etc. Okay, now the domains of geography is to resolve the current day problems, who gets what, where and how. ऐसे करके आप इसको खत्म कर सकते हो. Okay, so this was a nice question. Okay, you can just see some model answers here that we had provided you in GU 300 plus program. So you see Varenius Kant, Humboldt Ritter, and then crisis phase. This is a particular schematic which is mostly applicable in almost all questions of geographical thought. That is very important बच्चों. कुछ ऐसे schematics होने चाहिए, ऐसे कुछ diagrams होने चाहिए जो आप बहुत सारी जगह apply कर सकते हो. Otherwise what would happen is you would struggle to include thoughts in your answer. If you want कि आपका आंसर अलग दिखे, ऐसे कुछ स्कीमेटिक्स, फ्लो चार्ट्स आप थॉट्स के बना लो जो आप बहुत सारे आंसर्स में अप्लाई कर सकते हो, क्योंकि यही कंसेप्ट हैज बीन द फंडामेंटल ओके एस्पेक्ट इन डेवलपमेंट ऑफ ज्योग्राफी एज एन इंडिपेंडेंट सब्जेक्ट. ओके, सो हियर आल्सो this type of schematic or this type of schematic can also do, which is showing the different type of dualisms or dichotomies, determinism versus possibilism, general versus special, theoretical versus applied, ideographic versus nomothetic, systematic versus regional, physical versus human. ठीक है, तो इसमें सारे dichotomy दिखा दिए, एक ही बात है. Next question is a direct question. ठीक है, इसको डिस्कस करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Analyze the role of language and religion in delineating major cultural regions of world. Okay, thoughts, cultural regionalization. I will tell you what add-on you can add in this answer. For example, Radzel's concept of cultural landscapes. Okay, provided encouragement to geographers for cultural regionalization. Vidal का concept use कर सकते हो, cultural landscape use कर सकते हो, Carlsor, okay, Spencer. Okay, you can include these thinkers, and apart from that, you must include the Brook and Webb's classification. Okay, so that is where we see this linkage, language and religion. Okay, that influences the delineation of the major cultural regions. So discuss about this classification, and that was the answer itself. Okay, you must be having this in your notes. So this is a direct question. Next question is also direct question, but I will tell you what linkages you could have applied here. Analyze the spatial patterns and regional specialization, okay, of plantation crops across tropical and subtropical regions. So एक तो आपको बता देना है, देखो, tropical and subtropical regions, particular climatic conditions, okay, soils, precipitation, basically the ACR and AER, again determinism, climatic determinism, right? Simple. So will it have an influence on the vegetation, crops, etc. of that particular zone or not? Definitely yes. That was the entire answer. Simple. कितना simple question था, है ना? अब इसमें आप linkages बना सकते हो, क्योंकि उन्होंने बोला स्पेशल पैटर्न है, रीजनल स्पेशलाइजेशन. तो एक तो स्पेशल पैटर्न है, जोनल है, और रीजनल स्पेशलाइजेशंस भी तो हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल रीजनल स्पेशलाइजेशन इन दैट पर्टिकुलर जोन फॉर शुगर केन कल्टीवेशन एक्सेट्रा. सो प्लांटेशंस which are having regional specialization and the zonal spatial arrangements, patterns, that is what was required here. Okay, with the given precipitation, temperature, soil characteristics, what are the different plantations which have emerged historically and what are some of the regional specializations. तो आप इसमें बात कर सकते हो. Okay, this I have shown. Okay, for the zonal one, तो आप इसमें आप थोड़ा सा विटलसी के साथ में लिंक कर सकते हो और प्लांटेशंस की बात कर सकते हो. ओके, दैट इज प्लांटेशंस. Okay, so I've linked it with Vitalcy, and apart from that you can mention the specific ones, the coffee plantations, okay, Brazil cocoa plantations, Ghana tea plantations, across India sugarcane plantations, Cuba rubber plantations, Malaysia palm oil plantations, Indonesia, etc. Okay, so some special ones, oil palm plantations, okay, with some of the names. Okay, then you can also link it with, this is the world distribution of crops, another map where you can mention about the plantations in these particular areas, subtropical, tropical wala, okay, and this is the AEZ, agroecological zones. Okay, so tropical wet, tropical moist, okay, उसके साथ में आप लिंक कर सकते हो. But because also please understand, क्वेश्चन ध्यान से पढ़ो. Spatial patterns and regional specialization of plantation crops across tropical and subtropical region. अब इसमें ये भी ध्यान देना है हमें, regionally, okay, we are talking about the zone which is having a particular characteristic, okay, rising air, okay, and wet and very heavy precipitation 250-300, which is fine, okay, across tropical and subtropical regions. But there are regional variations on the account of altitude, on the account of leeward and windward side, on the account of coastal areas, okay, and subtropical areas, there would be subsidence, okay, there would be an impact in those areas which are drier areas, तो वो रीजनल इम्प्लीकेशन भी आपको दिखाना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, सो दैट वाज द एंटायर इंटरप्रिटेशन हियर. रीजनल स्पेशलाइजेशन भी आप थोड़ा सा एक बॉक्स में डाल सकते हो टुवर्ड्स द एंड. ओके, दैट इज द जोनल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक, बट देयर विल बी रीजनल वेरिएशन ऑल्सो. Now this question is an important question because ये 20 मार्कर क्वेश्चन है. पहली बात कंटेंट नहीं है तो ये क्वेश्चन तो हाथ ही नहीं लगाने हैं. आप इसको अगर जस्टिफाई नहीं कर पा रहे हो, मैं ऑयल का इंपॉर्टेंस क्या ही बताऊँ एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी में. सो लेट मी जस्ट स्किप दिस क्वेश्चन, है ना. दैट वुड बी फाइन बिकॉज यू हैव ऑल्टरनेटिव्स, यू हैव चॉइसेस. हैड दिस क्वेश्चन वुड बी कि ऑयल इज लेस इंपॉर्टेंट नाउ इट इज इन एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी, तो वो आप अच्छे से लिख देते, है ना, क्लीन एनर्जी के ऊपर. ऐसे क्वेश्चंस को जब तक डाइवर्सिफाइड फॉर्म में आप जस्टिफाई नहीं कर सकते, डोंट अटेम्प्ट सच क्वेश्चंस. ओके, ये आपको सीमिंगली लग रहा है आसान क्वेश्चन है, बट इसको जस्टिफाई करना मुश्किल हो जाता. बट एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी के साथ लिंक्ड है तो प्रोबेबली यू कुड हैव. ओके, व्हाट इज द रोल ऑफ ऑयल इन क्लीन एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन? क्वेश्चन इज वेरी सिंपल, प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड दैट. We have conventional resources, we have non-conventional resources. Even though we want a clean energy transition, we are talking about organic unity, we are talking about deep ecology, we are talking about net zero emission, etc. There are successful, okay, examples, models like geothermal energy development across island, okay, lot of development around wind and solar energy development around parts of Europe, Germany, France, etc., which is fine. But please understand that energy transition is happening parallelly with economic development. So on one hand, energy transition is happening. Okay, now see, when we are talking about energy security, what do we mean by energy security? We should have sufficient amount of energy with us. So first, from the perspective of, okay, the available energy resources, so conventional, non-conventional ones, okay, some resources on which we have been dependent, although they might have not been clean energy resources, but we have been traditionally dependent on them. There are other resources on which we are transitioning, but we still do not have sufficient technology to harness their potential sustainably and integrate them in our energy grid, right? And secondly, very importantly, the cost of harnessing those energy resources which we have not been utilizing hitherto, that might be high. We do not have the sufficient technology for their development. That is also the context. And sometimes to harness those resources, the methods that we are currently utilizing might also not be the methods, okay, which would not lead to any emission. Probably the methods we are using to harness the potential of those resources, which when used, okay, would be leading to lesser emissions. But currently, while we are trying to tap their potential, the methods that we are using would cause more emissions. So in that context, energy security is not only about energy transition and energy diversification. Yes, we need to, okay, enlarge our basket when we are talking about the resources from which we are harnessing our energy, right? So we need to enlarge this basket, which is fine. So energy transition would require transitioning towards the cleaner sources of energy. For example, we are talking about harnessing the potential of geothermal energy, okay, in the high altitude areas like Puga. But you must be knowing about the Puga geothermal power plant. It is located in very high altitude area in Ladakh, okay, and for the development of that and for harnessing the potential of geothermal itself, lot of technological transformation is required in a very ecologically fragile area which is still under development. And it has been so many years, okay, where we are still trying to harness the potential of geothermal energy here. So we do not know the time which is required for energy transition. In that given time period, will the economic development stop, or will the demographic transition stop? Or will we not go into higher stages of social capillarity? Nothing of this will stop. So if we want to completely rely on solar or wind or sustainable clean sources of energy, either the transition has to be very quick or it should go parallel, okay, in lines with our dependency on those sources on which we have been dependent upon. So it can be coal, it can be oil, etc. We need to be still dependent upon that while doing the sustainable energy transition. Because when we are talking about oil resources, okay, we are also talking about the employment opportunities. We are also talking about industrialization. We are talking about the higher stages of Rostov. Please understand that context. Now you need to justify this, and then talk about energy security. Okay, energy security is not alone about energy diversification to cleaner resources and stopping the economic development. Okay, so energy security, why that is required? Energy security is required because of the geopolitical context. We need to reduce the dependencies on the import. Okay, because this kind of a situation, when we are talking about dependency on a particular country, okay, that can lead to conflicts, war situation, increase in the price of a particular fuel, and that also impacts the local economy. So geopolitical perspectives, economic implications definitely are there. We want to move towards higher social capillarity, higher order of social capillarity, higher stages of Rostov, economic implications, agglomerations, clustering. But we must also talk about environmental sustainability. So these should be cleaner fuels, technological advancements, very important, infrastructure resilience, energy dependence and diversity, energy access for all. We are not talking about energy diversification only from the perspective of industrialization. Energy diversification, energy security is required also for the rural settlements, accessibility to all. अब solar का जो diffusion हुआ है, that is one classical example how the diffusion of technology should take place. Okay, it is at rooftop, it is across the fields, okay, pumps, okay, across agriculture fields, etc. And now parallelly talk about importance of oil for energy security. It is for energy security, job creation, fuel production, chemical production, etc. So how can we negate the contribution of oil in energy security? This is the role in clean energy transition. That is, it will not happen in silos, that let's transform into completely into solar. That would not happen in a day or two. We currently have lot of industrial dependence on, okay, oil for energy security, lot of dependence of economy on oil. So hence it has got its own role in clean energy transition, because currently we are not dependent on it, okay. So that is why importance of oil, okay. So in that context you must answer this particular question, otherwise your answer will not be holistic answer, okay. Then definitely towards conclusion mention, okay, by 2070 we must be completely non-dependent upon the conventional resources and all of that, that you can mention in the conclusion, okay. But currently in the body of the answer you must try to substantiate that aspect. Now this question is a very interesting question, because it was not alone about primate cities. Critically evaluate the role of primate cities in dominating the urban sphere of influence in developing countries. आपने अगर ध्यान दिया होगा थोड़ा सा भी, अगर इंटरेस्ट से हम लोग ज्योग्राफी ऑप्शनल पढ़ रहे हैं, तो ऐसे पढ़ रहे हैं कि भाई अब ले लिया ऑप्शनल तो पढ़ ही रहे हैं, कोई भी जो भी ऑप्शन लिया है ना, फॉर दैट मैटर ऑफ फैक्ट कोई भी ऑप्शनल है तो बस पढ़ रहे हैं क्योंकि मेंस देना है। और एक थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्ट जब आने लगेगा, एक स्टेज होती है जब आप थोड़ा सा उसको इंटरेस्टिंगली पढ़ने लगते हो, अगर थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्ट जनरेट हुआ है तो पास्ट 2-3 सालों के पेपर्स अगर आपने ठीक से पढ़े हैं, स्पेशली इस ईयर का आपने ध्यान दिया होगा, रीजनल कंटेक्स्ट हैज बिकम वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। अब कोई भी क्वेश्चन जो आ रहा है ना, उसमें कहीं ना कहीं रीजनल कंटेक्स्ट आ रहा है। अमेजोन कांगो आया, राइट, अभी ये वाला कंटेक्स्ट आया, डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज आया, एक्सेट्रा मेनी क्वेश्चंस में हमने देखा। तो कोई भी आप थीम पढ़ रहे हो, कोई भी आप टॉपिक पढ़ रहे हो ज्योग्राफी में, ये ध्यान देना है, प्लीज रीड इट फ्रॉम अ रीजनल पर्सपेक्टिव कि इसका इम्प्लीकेशन क्या हो सकता है ऑन अ पर्टिकुलर रीजन, ओके। चलो अब इसमें देखते हैं लिंकेजेस क्या क्या है इस क्वेश्चन में, और हमको इसमें क्या लिखना है कि ये आंसर हमारा थोड़ा ऑप्शनल रिलेटेड बन जाए। रोल ऑफ प्राइमेट सिटीज, now see developing countries, so Rostov 2-3, periphery, semi periphery, ठीक है। इन्हीं कंट्रीज में दे आर आस्किंग यू अबाउट प्राइमेट सिटीज, ओके, in sphere of influence in developing countries. Now see, this is a primate center which is exhibiting primacy. Now this is the sphere of influence of this primate center. So is this a dominant city? Yes. Does it have dominant, okay, you can say economic aspects? Yes. The population will be higher? Yes. Industrialization, okay, investments, etc. तो एक प्राइमेट सेंटर है, क्या क्यूमुलेटिव कॉजेशन हुआ है इन द स्फीयर ऑफ इन्फ्लुएंस, ओके। नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज रोल ऑफ प्राइमेट सिटीज। अब यहाँ दो रोल है इसके। पहला रोल है इन द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज इन द इनिशियल स्टेजेस ऑफ डेवलपमेंट, दिस इज अ प्राइमेट सेंटर, सो दिस इज गोइंग टू शो बैकवॉश, दिस वुड बी फर्स्ट रोल, दिस विल शो बैकवॉश। व्हाट डू वी मीन बाय बैकवॉश? That is all the resources, okay, from hinterland that will be taken up by the primate center like a suction pump. So this will be first role. That is all higher order hierarchical services will be provided in the primate center. This is the first role. मेडिकल सेंटर जाना है, एम्स जाना है तो प्राइमेट सेंटर में जाना है, आईआईटी तो प्राइमेट सेंटर में है, एयरपोर्ट तो प्राइमेट सेंटर में है, ओके, रेलवे स्टेशन यहाँ पर है, ठीक है, एक्सेट्रा. सो प्राइमेट सेंटर्स लाइक नॉर्थ ईस्ट रीजन कैपिटल सेंटर्स, ऑल आर प्राइमेट सेंटर्स, राइट. सो ये पहला रोल हो गया, दैट इज बैकवॉश. सेकेंड रोल वुड बी डुप्लीकेशन ऑफ रिसोर्सेज इज अवॉइडेड. ठीक है, एक तो हो गया थोड़ा नेगेटिव कंटेक्स्ट कि बैकवॉश हो गया तो इसलिए हिंटरलैंड एरिया डेवलप नहीं हो रहा है. सेकंड है डुप्लीकेशन ऑफ रिसोर्सेज नहीं हो रहा है. तो एयरपोर्ट एक ही है, 10 एयरपोर्ट अगर होते उसकी यूटिलिटी नहीं होती तो सोशल डिजायरेबिलिटी वर्सेस इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी वुड बी क्वेश्चन्ड. सो हियर डुप्लीकेशन ऑफ रिसोर्सेज इज अवॉइडेड. अनदर इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट है यहाँ पर, राइट. सो एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन है, इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी है, ओके. दिस ऑल्सो एक्ट्स एज अ पुल सेंटर, ओके. सो माइग्रेशन सेंटर है, यहाँ ज़ेलेंस्की स्टेज 3 माइग्रेशन हो रहा है, रूरल टू अर्बन है, तो ये रोल है ये प्राइमेट सेंटर का. दिस इज मोनोसेंट्रिक अप्रोच इन द अर्बन डेवलपमेंट. इनिशियल स्टेजेस ऑफ डेवलपमेंट है ना, सो वी वांट मोनोसेंट्रिक डेवलपमेंट. सो दिस इज प्राइमरी फ्लो, ओके, सीबीडी. सो सेंट्रल बिजनेस डिस्ट्रिक्ट वाला मॉडल जो है यहाँ अप्लाई हो सकता है, ठीक है. पॉलीसेंट्रिक अप्रोच नहीं है, अभी मोनोसेंट्रिक अप्रोच है. बट इन द प्राइमेट, इन द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, ओके, व्हेन द प्राइमेट सेंटर आल्सो स्टार्ट्स डेवलपिंग फंक्शनल लिंकेजेस, ये आपका सेकंड पार्ट ऑफ आंसर बन सकता था. व्हेन द प्राइमेट सेंटर आल्सो स्टार्ट्स डेवलपिंग linkages like, okay, across some states, like for example, okay, now we have seen the dispersion of growth across different parts, okay, of Madhya Pradesh, for example, or different parts of Kerala, Tamil Nadu. There has been dispersion of growth, right? So then there will be monocentric approach, sorry, polycentric approach, okay. The growth is dispersed, so now the role of primate center is also spread effect. So this is polycentric growth. तो ये मोनोसेंट्रिक और पॉलीसेंट्रिक हमने किया भी था, ये एक आंसर में आई रिमेंबर इन GU 300 प्लस, ओके. सो हियर यू कैन सी that this is primate center, and in the early stages of development, okay, in the sphere of influence, this would have disproportionate growth. So role will be very important economically, socially, politically, etc. And later it would be dispersion. So probably you could include these diagrams in the answer. Let's move to the next question. The global demographic landscape is evolving with rapid population growth in some places and rapid aging in others, elucidated with examples. जब भी ऐसे कोई क्वेश्चन आ गया, आपको केस स्टडीज और एग्जांपल्स देने ही हैं, ओके. सिंपल क्वेश्चन, demographic landscape is evolving. Now if you could map it with this question, with the discussion, okay, in Geographica, there was a news article that Japan is inching towards having just one child left by 2720. सिर्फ one child रह जाएगा because it has transitioned into stage 5, okay. So Japan's demographic crisis is further exacerbated by aging population, and almost 30%, okay, of the population is 65 years or older. एक ये एग्जाम्पल बन गया, ठीक है. अभी पॉपुलेशन पिरामिड से आप एग्जाम्पल्स दिखा सकते हो. दिस इज अंगोला पॉपुलेशन पिरामिड, दिस इज जापान, सो इन्वर्टेड पिरामिड, एंड दिस इज एक्सपैंडिंग, ओके. सो जस्ट विद द हेल्प ऑफ दीज एग्जाम्पल्स, ओके, डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन लगा के, ओके, डिफरेंट स्टेजेस ऑफ डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन, use the concept of population pyramid, okay. In examples mention about the proportion of the elderly population in the total population composition, okay, and also mention which stages of DTM along with the population pyramid. यहाँ एक अच्छा केस हो सकता था जो हमने क्लास में भी किया था, इंडिया और चाइना का बच्चों. Take case study of India and China, rapidly aging population, India and China. You can use it here also, एंड देयर इज अनदर क्वेश्चन ऑन डेमोग्राफिक ट्रांजिशन थ्योरी बाद में, उसमें भी आप यूज कर सकते हो. बट ये समझो करंट अफेयर्स का इंपॉर्टेंस क्या है. यही थीम आपकी करंट अफेयर्स में एटलीस्ट थ्रू आउट द ईयर it must have appeared multiple times across different news articles. कितना इंपॉर्टेंट थीम था, इसको हम कैसे इग्नोर कर सकते हैं. ओके, सो एजिंग पॉपुलेशन के ऊपर में आप और बाकी सारे कंसेप्ट जो आपको पता है, सेनाइल पॉपुलेशन, सिल्वर इकोनॉमी, सेकेंड डेमोग्राफिक डिविडेंड एक्सेट्रा, यू कैन इंक्लूड दिस in this particular answer. Okay, and the different other theories also, some of the theories you can apply it here and some theories you can apply in the other question that was also on demographic transition. Okay, you can use the concept of Mills, Spencer etc. वो भी आप यहाँ पे यूज कर सकते हो. Next, why has the Pirk's theory of growth pole as a model of regional growth been criticized? Explain with examples. Okay, now this question was very interesting question और इसको हमने बहुत सारे themes के across इसको discuss किया था. It is simple critical analysis of growth pole. Okay, that's it, with examples. अच्छा, examples के लिए आप growth pole का model जो है, okay, for example we had done this Pirk's growth pole, okay, for Nakok region also. Nakok region case study हमने किया था. You can use such case studies in example here. Now simple question is that, okay, if a region develops as a growth pole, what are the implications? Okay, and when you discuss this question also use the concept of, okay, cumulative causation, use the concepts of core periphery, Hirschman, Friedman, Gunnar, Medal etc. ये सब use करो आप. ठीक है. Now see, as a model of regional growth being criticized, okay, explain with example. अब ये क्वेश्चन कैसा है, इसको ध्यान से समझो. ये क्वेश्चन पॉजिटिव है या फिर नेगेटिव है उस कंसेप्ट के को लेकर के. थोड़ा सा नेगेटिव असर्शन है कि भाई ऐसा है और ये क्रिटिसाइज्ड है. इसका मतलब क्या है कि ग्रोथ पोल जो एंटिसिपेट किया गया था वो हुआ नहीं है, वो कंसेप्ट. ओके, एंड दैट इज व्हाई इट हैज बीन क्रिटिसाइज्ड. ओके, जो हमने सोचा था कि हमें ग्रोथ पोल से एडवांटेजेस होंगे लेटर स्टेजेस में बाय इंटरलिंकेजेस बैकवर्ड एंड फॉरवर्ड, वो हुए नहीं है. उसके कारण से ग्रोथ पोल कंसेप्ट हैज बीन क्रिटिसाइज्ड. दैट इज द एंटायर आइडिया एंड टेल विद द हेल्प ऑफ एग्जांपल. ओके, अब इसको कैसे अटेम्प्ट करोगे आप, आई विल टेल यू. First of all, tell simply about the concept of growth pole. What is the concept of growth pole? As envisaged by Piruk, just mentioned that growth is not, okay, uniform. Growth happens in spurts, and growth is concentrated around a pole. Okay, and initially there will be backwash. Okay, and you can also link it with the deliberate imbalance-based growth strategy. Okay, so it will be kind of a cumulative causation. So it will be backwash. Initial growth will be backwash, but then there will be emergence of a secondary growth pole and there will be spread effect. And once there will be spread effect, then there will be interlinkages, functional interlinkages would develop. So that would lead to, okay, dispersion of growth. That was the entire idea, but why it is criticized? Okay, for example, here in the answer, we have used a case study. One is growth pole, which has led to spread effect. One is growth pole, which has led to failure of trickle down. For example, the initial growth poles post-independence in India, Bhilai, Bokaro, etc., which have remained as a suction pump, backwash, and there has been lack of spread effect. And here another, okay, example that you can take is from Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley में dispersion of growth हुआ है कि नहीं? Yes. So initially growth होने के बाद, dispersion होने के बाद, Silicon Valley, California, there was multi-nuclei. Now there is urban rim model there. Why urban rim? The growth must have dispersed. So dispersion of growth has happened. Here dispersion didn't happen, so cumulative causation. cumulative causation theory, and hence this is criticism of growth pole. Okay, so you have multiple examples, not alone from India, you have multiple examples. East west coast का अगर आप लोगे examples, for example China, सारे growth poles कहाँ हैं? आपके ईस्ट कोस्ट में है, ठीक है, कॉन्वर्बेशन डेवलपमेंट, एंड वेस्टर्न कोस्ट में ना तो पॉपुलेशन की डेंसिटी है और ना ही इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट है. सो लॉट ऑफ ओके देयर आर इनइक्वालिटीज, इम्बैलेंसेस. ग्रोथ पोल जो है आपका जो है डिस्पर्शन ऑफ ग्रोथ नहीं हुआ है, फॉर एग्जांपल अक्रॉस चाइना. ओके, सिमिलरली अक्रॉस द अदर पार्ट्स ऑल्सो, hinterland of let's say European countries in the coastal areas and the interior hinterlands, okay, heartland. So that is, you can compare that also, interior hinterland of Russia, okay, and you can say the western area, okay, which is industrialized. ऐसे करके आप कुछ linkages बना सकते हो with the help of examples, right? Very importantly, when you are talking about the lack of dispersion of growth, you must also talk about the problems associated with the concept. The idea is that we are talking about only specific industries when we are talking about growth pole. We are negating the role of the local economies. समझ में आ रहा है? So local economies, for example, agrarian economies. In the agrarian economies, the growth pole can be on the basis of agro-processing center itself. Why are we talking about growth poles only on the basis of heavy industries? We have negated the role of the economies which are agrarian, where the growth poles can be agrarian growth poles, okay, agriculture processing center growth poles. We are negating the role of hierarchical growth poles, okay, hierarchy. Dispersion of growth can be in hierarchical order, okay, district then village, like that. It can be hierarchical in order, okay. And we are also not taking into consideration the other aspects. For example, okay, growth pole in a plain region and growth pole in a mountain area, growth pole in the island area, that would be different in the context, isn't it so? So growth pole in the mountain area, can it be same to the growth pole in the alluvial soil region, Gangetic plain area? No, it cannot be same. Also similarly, when we are talking about the growth pole development, for example, across Singapore, it is also having a locational advantage. Probably, if there was not a locational advantage, the development would not have been, okay, synonymous like it is currently. So we are talking about the growth pole, but also take into consideration the local advantage, okay, that is locational perspective. So rimland, accessibility to seas, and the advantage of a growth pole in the context of locational perspective, okay. So that is why you cannot talk about growth pole only in the context of growth pole and emergence of the growth pole on the basis of a core industry, okay. These linkages are also missing many a times because of lack of the skilled labor in the hinterland area, lack of functional linkages because of lot of disparity in the socio-economic development between core and periphery. The core area is disproportionately developed socio-economically, very high in order of social capitality, whereas the peripheral areas, okay, that is disproportionately backward. So failure also of industrialized regions across multiple regions across India post independence, why the functional linkages couldn't be developed, okay. All these are criticisms. You can discuss it with the maps, examples across different countries, but very importantly, until and unless you are going to justify it with examples, this answer would be not sufficient, because you need to give it examples and case studies. Now this is the question that I was talking about, okay. Analyze the role of demographic transition theory in explaining variations in fertility and mortality rates globally. Now see the TFR rates, mortality rates, aging, etc. Okay. So demographic attributes. The question is link it with the demographic transition theory. Now if you wouldn't have given the India China case study, you could have given it here also, because the question is very much on fertility and mortality rates. ये ध्यान देना है, ठीक है. तो सिंपल सी बात है, सारे स्टेजेस बना दो, स्टेज 1 2 को कंबाइन कर दो, स्टेज 2 अलग 3 अलग ले लो, स्टेज 4 and 5 maybe you can combine and mention a specific paragraph on stage 5 and maybe China's case study. Okay, so initial stages, mention the fertility rates are high, birth rates are high, and the death rates are also high. Okay, this is basically a short note on demographic transition, talking specifically about fertility, mortality rates, aging, etc. Okay, so birth rate high, okay, death rate is also high. By second stage the death rate declines. The third stage you can take as a separate stage where the fertility rates are high, and this is a demographic dividend stage where the base is very large. Okay, and then fourth and fifth stage where the senile population increases, and in the fifth stage there can be negative population growth. Okay, you can see the birth rate is even less than death rate. So this is birth rate, this is death rate. Now relate all these aspects with the socio-economic transition. So link it with also the other concepts, okay, like Mill, Castro, Spencer. Okay. So you must tell how the socio-economic transition happens, and that transition also impacts the fertility rates and also the mortality, aging rates, etc. Okay, the life expectancy increases, the aging elderly population increases, the mortality rate reduces, fertility rate reduces further, like that. You can answer this particular question. Okay, and you must also link it with the other concepts, Mill, Castro, Spencer, for that matter of fact, Bosserup, social capillarity. All these concepts can be interlinked because all of them are almost saying one and the same thing. Okay, like complexity of life increases, the fertility reduces, all of them are almost synonymous. Okay, complexity would increase with rising socio-economic standards, isn't it so? So just with the help of the different demographic stages, justify how the fertility and mortality rates that have changed. Now probably you can use a case study of India and China, comparative analysis. India transitioning towards stage 4. Each and every other day there is an article on the fertility rates of India. Fertility rate 2, less than 2.1, etc. रिप्लेसमेंट लेवल से कम हो गया है ना. और चाइना जो है लास्ट 2 साल से ट्रांजिशन हो चुका है अभी, है ना, टुवर्ड्स नेगेटिव आपका पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ रेट. ओके, सो देयर द बर्थ रेट इज नाउ लोअर देन द डेथ रेट. सो ये कंटेक्स्ट because of which China's demographic dividend now is being questioned and all of that. That is why China has been in news in the past few years. Okay, तो ये आप एक context कर सकते थे, elderly, increasing elderly population in China, which is a cause of concern for even India, because India is also going to transition towards stage 4 and 5 eventually. Okay, because the fertility rates are reducing and more, the aging population, okay, that is increasing. तो इस तरीके से आप इसको आंसर कर सकते हो, and with the help of certain examples across different countries. Okay, what are the current fertility rates? So just now the fertility rates are high across major countries of Africa only. So fertility rates are just high here only, but in the other countries mostly this is global fertility rate. So global fertility rates, and this is map 2023. Okay, and the other colors which are shown, that is 4 or higher, mostly in parts of Africa and in some other countries, in parts of CAR, Central Asian region. But apart from that, the most of the countries now have a reduced fertility rates. Okay. With the help of examples and repercussions, you can just discuss this answer. Now this question, you could have attempted it, okay, easily. Regional components make the regional synthesis in spatial arrangement. Okay. Now see, Now when we are talking about regional components for regional synthesis, okay, so what are we talking about? We are talking about agriculture. We are talking about, let's say agriculture ही उठा लेते हैं, agriculture in relationship with climate, with soil, okay, precipitation, temperature, availability of water resources, okay, topography, okay, let's say irrigation, government policies, labor productivity. Now I am helping you understand what the question is asking you. Okay, so one phenomena हमने ले लिया है agriculture. Okay, now is agriculture only influenced by deterministic factors? Will it only be influenced by climate, soil, precipitation, temperature, topography? No, that is only one aspect, that is the physical aspects, that is determinism. Okay, but agriculture in a particular area will also be influenced by irrigation, type of irrigation, irrigation infrastructure, what are the policies which have been implemented in that area, okay, for emancipation of agriculture, what is the labor productivity, what type of the cropping pattern is done, okay, what type of crops are being sown here, which particular time period of the year the crops are being sown, because that would in longer run also impact the soil fertility. Okay, what is the type of agriculture which is being performed, is it plantation agriculture, is it okay subsistence farming, etc. What are the government policies, okay, what is the labor productivity, etc. So we are talking about agriculture, but we are also talking about the relationship of that phenomena with the other phenomena, both human as well as physical. We are talking about a particular region and we are trying to do the regional synthesis on the basis of these regional components and in a sequential time period, chronological order of development. So I am talking about regional synthesis with respect to agriculture. Okay, let's say in Marathwada region, 1920s, 50s, 1970s, 2010. Okay, so I have taken one example, for example Marathwada. Okay, we have taken another example, coastal regions of China, prairies, steppes, etc. Now while I am talking about these regional components, do they influence the regional synthesis across these regions in a spatial arrangement or not? Yes, this was the question what it was all about. Now what you could have done is, I have taken one example of agriculture, I have given you certain regions over which you could show the regional synthesis. Okay, this is just one component. Okay, this is just one discussion, one theme, agriculture. Okay, not one component, one theme, agriculture. You could have elaborated this question around different themes. मैंने एक agriculture ले लिया, आप ले सकते हो, okay, for example settlements, population distribution, whatever. It is up to you now. You understand the context. Okay. So for example here, you can see this. Okay, this is regional synthesis. So New Delhi, okay, climate, temperature, rainfall, humidity, etc. other variables. Okay, 2 months ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So this is regional synthesis. Okay, with the help of the regional components, Old Delhi, Mathura, etc. Okay, chronologically. Okay, so regional synthesis is a geographic method of integrating multiple physical, social, economic and political factors to create a comprehensive holistic understanding of a region as a unique interconnected whole. Unique interconnected whole. समझ में आ रहा है? Instead of focusing on a single variable, it synthesizes diverse data to reveal causal relationships between patterns, helping to explain a region's challenges. अब जब हमने ये कर लिया तब हमें पता लग गया भाई एग्रीकल्चर के चैलेंजेस क्या है मराठवाड़ा में, समझ में आ रहा है? and overall development for purposes like planning and development, how I need to plan for the settlements, how I need to develop the settlements in the urban areas, okay, Delhi NCR, conurbations across Pacific coast of China, etc. Okay. Now see, this was an answer which was given in Geo 300. Okay. So in beginning, similarly you could have also started with regional synthesis, एक definition दे सकते हो. Okay. So you can mention Ackermann, etc. Regional synthesis, maybe a schematic, okay, for this multidimensionality, that is also fine. And then some aspects which were discussed in this question were regional synthesis with respect to climate change and socio-economic disparity. So we have taken up two contexts. You can elaborate further. You can take for agriculture, settlements, etc. But very importantly, end the discussion with this, okay, this discussion, okay, that is for socio-economic disparities also I have told you that you can use it. End the discussion with opinion of Berry. The systematic and regional geography are not different approaches, but are two extremes of continuum. Like we say, physical and human, regional and systematic. Okay, regional and systematic, they are not different, they are just two extremes of continuum. Hence the dichotomy of two approaches supporting each other give rise to multi-dimensional problem solving technique, okay, that is regional synthesis. So in this manner you could have attempted this particular question. Now see, overall analysis of geography optional paper 1 is, there were many questions which you could have chosen, okay, from the lengthy question. 15-20 मार्कर में ऐसे क्वेश्चन थे जो आप आसानी से चूज करके ये क्वेश्चंस को अटेम्प्ट कर सकते हो. और आज के डिस्कशन के बाद आई एम होपिंग now you have enough content, how you are able to interlink the concepts, thinkers, current affairs, case studies in the answers. Okay, so that is all with respect to geography optional paper 1 discussion. Okay, if you want to understand about these interlinkages, how we can develop them in the answer writing across the other parts of the units in geography optional as well, we are starting with the Geo 300 plus program from 15th of the September. Okay, where we will be doing extensive answer writing practice, and there will be 14 sectional tests, okay, which will include 10 sectional and 4 full length tests, and along with that extensive mentorship sessions throughout the year. Okay, so this is not alone a mentorship and test series program. You will learn the answer writing and you will get a lot of mentorship throughout the year. Okay, if you are interested, you can click on the link given in the description box. Okay, now we are also going to do the geography optional paper 2 in-depth analysis, and I will provide you with the solutions. Okay, that will be done on the Monday, coming Monday. I'll be taking up the discussion on geography optional paper 2 with the detailed in-depth model answers, okay, discussion on paper 2, where I'll give you the solutions for paper 2. Okay, that is all for the discussion for geography optional paper 1. Okay, if you have written answers, if you want to show the answers, you can visit at the Sunya IAS center and show the answer scripts for geography optional paper 1 simultaneously. That is all for today. Thank you.